guys,
Business.
Yeah, that's part of the reason we were interested in Flagpole. We want to get more together.
No worries.
So you have to give your
Hey, before we get started, would any of you be interested in going to a comedy show Friday night at the Wolcott? I got 2 tickets. I'm going to be out of town. I'm happy to give them to anybody that would like to go.
I'll be looking at Cowboys.
Wow. Kyle? You're kind of looking at them.
without checking my wife, but.
You want to check with her?
Yeah,
Okay.
give me a minute.
They're yours if you'd like to go. If not, just throw them back at me and I'll find somebody to give them to. Okay, sorry we're running a few minutes late, but let's go ahead and get started if we may. Silence your cell phones, don't forget, please. And council meeting follow-up, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to be with all of you. One of the questions that I keep getting that I want to follow up with you on, both from the media and a few of you, is if we plan on taking steps to memorialize the process or formalize the process by which leadership is appointed at the end of every calendar year and essentially ratified at the beginning of every calendar year thereafter. So my question for you tonight is, do we want to have that conversation? If so, I would recommend that we do it in a work session forum where we can have, discussions, because the reality is if council does want to move forward, council gets to choose what they want to put into a policy of some kind that would take steps that you could consider to formalize this process. And so that really is fundamentally my question. Do we want to have an extended conversation in this regard, or are we comfortable with how it is now? That's really it. Amber?
I'd like to propose we get it on a work session so we can talk a little bit more about it. There's a couple ideas that I had and a few things that were brought to me from constituents, so I think probably doesn't need a ton of time, but I think it'd be good to chat about.
So everybody be okay with putting that on a future? Okay, very good.
All right, we will do that then. Absolutely.
Anything else on follow-up?
No, sir.
Okay, moving right along. Wyo Sports Ranch and the minimum setback requirements for the new facility up by the event center, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am not the expert with regard to the dilemma that is in front of us this evening. However, Liz and her team certainly have way more knowledge into this than I do. We have Jessica and her team here tonight as well from the Sports Ranch project. And so if I could, Mr. Mayor,
please
have Liz sort of set the table for us, and then we can entertain whatever questions you would like.
Certainly. Ms. Becker?
Mr. Mayor and councilors, great to see you. I hadn't seen you yet this year, so this is wonderful. We have a diagram behind me, and I kind of wanted to set the stage, but I also wanted to introduce for the new council members, our city planner, Craig Collins. Okay, because that comes into play here a little bit. So what we're asking for tonight is direction on pretty much a setback change, so an ordinance change for a setback pertaining not only to the Wyoming Sports Ranch project, but to all of our park properties. This topic was brought forward to the December Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and if you had a chance to read the council memo, what we're talking about tonight is, as the developers have been working on the Wyoming Sports Ranch project, and I wanted to kind of put this into context for our new counselors. You can kind of see where the event center is, and again, the location of where the Wyoming Sports Ranch project will be, as well as the associated parking. And in the site plan development, and along the main road, which is in fact historically on park zoned property, which is what the city owns, we have had a 30-foot setback requirement. No reason for it, it's just existed. And so Mr. Collins had done some research to see where this had come from and how, because we don't typically have that large of a setback on a lot of our commercial developments. And so in December at the Planning Commission meeting, we did bring forward the recommendation to shorten that setback. Typically, we have a 15-foot setback on commercial properties to allow for dry utilities to be up against the road, so that we don't want to have things built over the top of that. So as the sports ranch was developing, they recognized the need that they wanted to maximize this lot. I mean, we're pretty set, as you all can see, because we know how much the event center is built out in the parking lots. So they wanted to obviously maximize the lot size, get as many courts in there and the amenities that will truly be the hallmark of this project. So in doing so and maximizing the site design, staff felt that it would be appropriate to look at recommending the setback be reduced from 30 feet along Events Drive down to 15 feet. So again, this was brought forward to the Planning Commission meeting in December. Mr. Collins explained this to those commissioners. They discussed what other options were out there. That's outlined in your memo. One of which was to do a zone change and change this from park historic property to a commercial zoning to handle that. A lot more complicated. If we can proceed forward with with a ordinance change on the setback, that was what we were looking at doing. And so in your packet, we had prepared a draft ordinance. Again, this is not only have we presented this for the Sports Ranch project, but we're also presenting it as a setback change for all city parkland. Not that we see any big changes or developments in a lot of our city park property, but if we're doing it for this, for consistency, the ordinance does ask for this to be applied to all city park properties. So that's the first route of what I wanted to kind of visit with you all today and get some direction.
If you wouldn't mind, before you go on,
So,
would you mind taking some questions along the way?
absolutely.
Great. Mr. Gamaroth?
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Liz, for the information. You kind of touched on it, but I just wanted to make sure I don't have any specific criticism against reducing the setbacks from 30 to 15 feet, especially if it's just an arbitrary amount pulled out of thin air. Never a fan of those anyways, but I did just want to make sure 100% that we had done our diligence, that there would be no cascade effect if we do it for just this property, if that would create any sort of impact on any of the other properties designated park historic that are maybe at this point. I don't know what sort of effect it may have, if any, and so I just want to make sure that because we're kind of doing this, I agree with it in theory, just in general, but it's kind of at the request of a single developer, and so just want to make sure that nobody else further on down the line is going to have any sort of impact.
Counselor, or Mayor, Counselor, at this point, staff has not had any reason to be concerned about our other city-owned park properties being negatively impacted with the setback change applied. You all would be brought into the loop if we did have any changes to other city park property. But at this point, we did recommend the blanket across all properties, but there's nothing right off in our research that would show an issue. Yes, this property kind of allowed us to do this research, but it would apply to all without a lot of concern at this point in time.
Follow up,
Thank
please.
you. So am I assuming then, based on those comments, that the only other properties designated park historic throughout the city are essentially just park areas? There's no other semi-development,
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, no.
Just park? Okay, thank you.
Counselor Cathey?
The corner of 21st and Outer Drive, isn't that a park historic?
Mr. Mayor, yes, that is currently zoned and we are working on the ownership of that property.
Okay, the reason I brought that up is that I know in the past when we tried to put that property up for sale, we got a deluge of, not in my backyard type pushback. And my concern is that if we were to change that to a park, I would be concerned about 15-foot setbacks on 21st and on Outer Drive for the safety of the people that are in the park. Because that would allow you then, for example, to put playground equipment up within 15 feet of Outer Drive. And that concerns me by making this a blanket across the city. And that's just because I remember that one particular instance.
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, we have been working on the title with that because there is definitely deed restrictions to keep that as park. You bring up an excellent point, given that that is one of our few parks that is on such a major road.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I would hate to see us come in too, as a follow-up.
Absolutely.
I would hate to see us come in as well and add something else to the park there at the corner of 21st and Kingsbury and move things out closer to 21st Street, because that's always been, the neighbors are always concerned about it and the speeding and things.
The Fun Valley.
And I know that's a big park in the winter for sledding and things.
Yes, it
So,
is.
Counselor Ingebretson?
I have a question for Zulema. Would this help with, if we get the grants for Washington Park, would this add any additional space for anything?
Mayor, Counselor, that's a great question. It's really kind of new, and so we haven't necessarily applied it to plans that we have in the near future for other parks. I would say that likely it would give us a little bit more flexibility. That being said, I understand Counselor Kathy's concern, and certainly we would have complete control over where we place our structures and other amenities within the parks, and would stay away as far as necessary to ensure the safety of the participants in the park. So just because we can doesn't mean we will, and it'll just be evaluated on a side-by-side basis.
Ms. Becker, is it possible to do a conditional use permit for this particular building on that piece of property so that we're not blanketing all Park Historic and thereby taking away any concerns?
Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna have City Planner address that one on the
Mr. Mayor-
expert on conditional use
Mr.
permits.
Mayor, the process would be a variance. And the difficulty with the variance is the findings required. You have to you show a hardship, which is very difficult. We haven't gone through that training with council, I don't believe yet, about the required findings for variances, but they are notoriously difficult. I think it's been over 10 years since we've been able to approve them.
Thank you. And I'm assuming, just one second, please, as a follow-up, I'm assuming that the planning and zoning has already passed this and forwarded it to the council, is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, yes,
Okay.
that was in December.
Councilor Pollak?
Thank you. And I think that it seems to me that we would be pretty safe just going ahead with this and then implementing, letting parks implement their own policies to not build unsafe structures near roadways and whatnot. I think that would cover us and we could move on, and it would give us flexibility where it gives us flexibility, but I think we could trust internal policies to not design parks in a way that will be unsafe given these new parameters.
Ms. Becker, anything else? I'm
Mr.
assuming you're
Mayor,
looking for some direction.
yes, I was looking for thumbs.
Do we have any recommendation from
I
council?
agree with Amber. I think that that's probably the
sorry.
best thing to do is let the Parks Department just do what they do best.
Okay, let's, Vice Mayor?
That's kind of the direction I was gonna go, and basically I think trust the staff that they know what they're saying, what they're doing. And I think, kind of looking at, even at the memo, often these regulations have to come up, I think there's some conversation, and there have to be conversation of how do we move forward and change that, and it just happens, so I'm 100% comfortable with it, and taking the recommendation from the staff to do that.
So if council's okay to proceed with such a thing, can I see your thumbs, please? Okay, sounds like you have the direction you were looking for, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, I did want to bring up one other topic, and Ms. Lopez, do you want to step in on this one with me, which is looking at the modified lease agreement discussion? Do we want to talk about that? It all ties into the same project. When we were doing the plat for the recent property of the city-owned property across the street, and 6 of you should remember that. The property that we recently had zoned M1, M2 across the street, when we were doing the plat of this whole area, including this property that's zoned Park Historic, we did that in 2021. In 2022, the lease agreement for the Wyoming Sports Ranch to lease this parcel was drafted, and there was just a little bit of overlap of lease lines of what the city owns with what the Wyoming Sports Ranch wants to lease. And so that is referenced in the first paragraph of your memo that talks about a little bit of overlap in this agreement. And so it's more of a heads up that Ms. Lopez and City Attorney's Office will be bringing back a modified lease agreement to readjust the property lines in that agreement. Because again, just a little bit of when the platting was done, there's just a little, probably 15 feet about that got incorporated incorrectly in the lease agreement with what the plat was done in 2021. So just between departments and time changes on that when we put that development kind of on the back burner to discuss the M1, M2 zoning changes across the street, and that's kind of what caused a little bit of this. So it's just more of a heads up, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions?
And it'll be discussed with that memo when it comes forward.
I'm assuming it's just something that needs to be ratified and quite simple.
And if you turn around, the interim city attorney's nodding her head, so there you go. Yes, that just needs to be ratified.
Very good.
And I have talked to our deputy city attorney, Wallace Trumbath. He's aware of the situation and we'll work on that.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you, Liz.
letting us
Thank you.
bring that forward.
Okay, moving on to the ice arena expansion. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is a follow-up item that unfortunately not all of the current council, has been able to participate in prior to tonight. However, we certainly have had this discussion a number of times with your colleagues of past councils, and the direction that they have given has brought us here tonight. In the meantime, we have worked with representatives of our user groups who are here this evening, next to Ms. Lopez, with regard to an approach that perhaps they would find agreeable and that maybe you would find agreeable as well, that we can chat about this evening. And so our hope is, pursuant to what it is that council told us to do the last time we met on this topic, that we can get to a point where council feels comfortable either giving the green light for this project or the red light for this project, as it were, assuming that if indeed there were a green light, council would also identify funding that you would feel comfortable committing to this project as a means of leveraging some private funding that would help make this project happen. Now, I am certainly aware that if indeed council is comfortable, looking into funding and being willing to commit to that, council would have a real high interest in understanding how, in fact, that funding would be made available, and what that amount would be, and so on. And so I would certainly suggest that we can have that discussion this evening. But I would also say that indeed, if council is comfortable, does want to move forward, gives a green light, and is comfortable with a number, we should have more discussions about the means by which that funding should be made available. Now, I can give you anecdotal information tonight, and I can certainly give you information that would give you a feel for what some of those opportunity costs would be, depending on which way you want to go. But I would also highly encourage that tonight not be the last time we talk about funding options that would be thrown into the project, if in fact council wants to give a green light this evening, okay? I certainly know that it is highly unusual that for public projects of this, like this, that we have private funders that are willing to put in, the lion's share of what it is that is necessary to get the project done. So my hope is that council at least be open to the idea that this partnership is a means by which a public project can be done. Very unusual, but I certainly understand that your tolerance with regard to how much funding be made available is important to recognize and see if we can't measure. The one thing that I thought was also pretty remarkable with regard to what our representatives of our partners made known in recent meetings is that they would be willing to commit to a fairly shortened time frame with respect to a go or no-go for private funding that could be made available on fundraising efforts that would be undertaken. They indicated to me that the period by which private funds would be raised would be done within an 18-month time frame, which to me feels like a fairly aggressive, ambitious time frame by which the amount of dollars that they're looking for would need to be raised. And so my understanding is that they're willing to commit to having the private side of these dollars raised within 18 months, wherein if that's not the case, the project dies and the city doesn't have to worry about putting up whatever portion of funding the city council might commit to, and the means by which that would happen. The thing I want you to be real comfortable understanding too is if indeed the council wants to support a second sheet of ice project, that the council understands exactly what would be needed in terms of some of the operational issues that we discussed in the last meeting. Again, some of you were not able to participate in that conversation. So that indeed those assumptions are clear, they're known up front, and that when that project comes online, assuming that it does, we would then have the default direction to go and do certain things in order to make the operational subsidy go away as a benefit of this project coming online. And so I want to take a little time before we say yay or nay as a council to understand those implications that Ms. Lopez made really clear the last time we met, which by now has been, maybe 6 or 8 weeks or so. I'm not sure what that has been. So with that in mind, I would also set the table with this discussion with the following thoughts as well. I think as you consider this project and consider this expansion opportunity, you need to remember that Ms. Lopez's recommendation to you and her position was that if your interest and your goal is to eventually kill the subsidy for the ice arena and that facility and so on, the only means by which that'll be done over the long term is by expanding the amount of ice that we can sell. And that only comes in the form of making more ice available, having a second sheet in place. We are at the ceiling of what it is that we can do in terms of ice that's available. We don't believe we can rate increase our way out of the subsidy, which was a pivotal point that Zulema made with you the last time we had this conversation. And so therefore, my recommendation would be to envision your goals with respect to the subsidy of that facility in the context of determining whether or not you want to have this expansion. And again, with respect to what it is we need by operational initiatives as well as a part of that. The other thing that I think you should consider as well is what it is that you imagine as Casper's position in Wyoming's sports tourism industry ought to be. We certainly believe, particularly as it relates to what our user partners have indicated, that by expanding the ice arena, we too expand our position relative to what other options are available throughout the rest of the state and perhaps in the region. I don't know totally about that, but certainly within the state. And the pole position we could ostensibly take for this aspect of sports tourism. If we want to enhance it, we believe that looking at a second sheet of ice could certainly help us do that. That's not to say that we don't already have a good position with regard to this niche in the sports tourism industry in our state. But if indeed you want to be ahead of what it is that other cities and towns are positioning themselves for, and perhaps some of our competitors throughout the Mountain West region, you may want to consider the second sheet of ice as a means of improving our situation in that regard. And certainly, I think we can all agree that sports tourism is definitely one of the economic pillars in our community. It's up to you to determine whether or not it makes sense to try to improve that or not, particularly as it relates to this opportunity. With that being said, I'd like to turn the time over to Zulema here to remind you of what some of those operational needs are if you want to move ahead, so that if you do move ahead, we know what our default direction is thereafter, should the private side of these funds be raised.
Right before you start, do you mind, Mr. Vice Mayor?
Carter, can I ask a real quick question?
Of course.
So clarification as we kind of move forward with this. If the council agrees after we hear all the information, we get all that, gather those things, kind of get the cost somewhat, that 30,000 foot view of it.
Right.
If we say yes, are we going in to say, we're just going into a deeper discussion? Or are we saying yes to saying, you know, we're getting in there to that 50%, saying, hey, look, we're committing to this? I guess I kind of want to get a gauge from where maybe the council can have that idea of, when we say yes, are we going, hey, we're gonna kick the throttle up on this?
Well,
Does that make sense, Carter?
I think so, and if I don't quite capture what it is that you're asking, give me another shot. Okay. It makes sense to me that council have a feel, at the very, very least, with regard to what our financial commitments would be and what the cost of those commitments would include.
Okay.
Right? My recommendation to you is that council consider a floor of $3 million and a ceiling of a third of the project, not to exceed 4.4. Okay? So in my estimation, that's your range, right? With each of those, points along that range, the costs are going to vary, particularly as it relates to the way in which you decide to provide that funding. Whether it be, the council underwriting those costs with money that we have on hand, or with respect to other financing options that we can touch on tonight that also have pertinent costs associated with those options, okay? Certainly there is a low-cost alternative as it relates to other funding alternatives, and there's going to be costs even with you underwriting the project yourself, right? So we can go into that, but I would highly suggest that council simply take those options into consideration. I think the more fundamental question that needs to be answered tonight is whether you're comfortable with a green light or a red light.
And I think part of that revolves around, and we'll hear from Pat shortly, but they have investors online already that are willing to step up to the plate and put some money into this project, but they will not commit until the city has said yay or nay. And so I think that's the big, they're gonna need a yes tonight in order for them to be able to go out and start acquiring that money. So just so that you're aware. Zulema, are you ready? Sorry, Mike, did you have a question?
Just a quick, so just to clarify, so that's the private funding, the fundraising you're talking about is, and that's back to your issue about, or your point about, if the city commits and the donors come up with, they commit to X amount of dollars once the city commits, if they fail to raise that money, then the city is done.
Correct.
Okay.
The city is out. And Mr. Mayor, I would also say, Counselor, we are talking about a short time frame by which that's either a go or no go.
Yeah.
Which is unusual with regard to a fundraising effort that I'm familiar with at least, in my opinion. 18 months.
Would you like the floor, ma'am?
Mayor, councilors, thank you for the opportunity again to speak with you. I think the city manager really wrapped up a lot of my points very succinctly and really clearly for you. In full transparency, I do support this project, and he asked me flat out why, and the two reasons I gave was because, one, I think it's our only opportunity to eliminate the subsidy at the ice arena. I think we can improve our position, and I showed you that through the model in the current, that's sort of in the current model that was enhanced to meet our cost recovery goal and maybe go a little further in terms of sponsorships and improvements to concessions. But in my estimation, after poring over the model for well over a month, working with staff, meeting with user groups, we cannot eliminate the subsidy at that facility without a second sheet. So that's my primary reason for supporting this project. The second reason, as the city manager mentioned, I think that Casper and our area, all the surrounding communities included, are really at a pivotal point in time where there's a lot going on surrounding sports in our community. And this would just be one more weapon in the arsenal to really position Casper as a destination for sports. And so because of that, it's also an exciting prospect for our project. But as the city manager mentioned, there are some critical operational things that we would have to implement in order to reach that zero subsidy, even with the second sheet. And I need to make sure that you guys support those efforts before we move forward, because I don't want to make any empty promises that we can reach that zero subsidy position unless you understand that there are some things that we have to do. So probably what I'm going to assume would be one of the more controversial ones would be in the form of expanding concessions to allow beer sales. So we do know now with certainty that we would qualify for a special malt beverage permit at the ice arena that would allow us to serve beer only, malt beverages only, and have done some analysis to indicate that we believe that, coupled with some enhancements to our full concession offering, so certainly not just beer, but enhancing our menu slightly, changing some of our product line, and then additionally the sale of beer, we could double our concession revenue at the ice arena. But that would be critical to getting us to that zero subsidy position. The second thing that we would need to be able to do is attract a junior hockey club. And certainly we have interest. We have clubs calling us now wanting to position themselves in Casper. Unfortunately, we do not have a locker room facility to offer them, and that's a deal breaker for most clubs. They want dedicated locker room space for their club. And so we would have to attract and secure a junior hockey club that we estimate would pay about $25,000 annually in ice rental and locker room rental, which is very common throughout the region. We've checked other facilities that have junior hockey clubs, and that's about what they're bringing in revenue for those clubs. So I think that's a very realistic projection at that $25,000 mark. Another thing that we would have to do is sell sponsorships, corporate sponsorships, advertising, and those partnerships are going to be really, really important. So I need to know that you will allow me to name the ice sheets, name the building, name the concession stand, name the skybox. Pretty much, we would be looking for the opportunity to sell every corporate sponsorship that we could in order to create a sort of reliable and constant revenue stream for the facility. And then the last thing would be some rate increases. Certainly, we would not get to a zero subsidy without slight increases to the rate. If you want to see the model again, I'm sure Fleur would be happy to pull it up for me. But really, we were saying in order to reach zero subsidy, the rate increase would be about $1 a person for admission. And then we would look at rentals for the ice to increase for the power user groups, like I call them, about $25 an hour. Rentals for the facility for parties and things like that would also increase slightly. And then just down. A little more though. Right here. So if we could set Center this piece. So our memberships would increase by $5, our public skate times would increase by $1, and then we would be looking at, $20 increases for our hourly ice time for our user groups. If you scroll down a little bit more. This would be our doubling of concessions here, 20% increase in advertising, and that's really fairly moderate, but that would be our sponsorships and naming rights, and then 10% increase in merchandise sales for the facility. And so I really believe that with the second sheet, with those 4 critical components in place, we could get to some subsidy over time.
Well, just a couple of comments for the council. I've gone to many hockey games in my life, and never have I not had a beer or 5 at a hockey game. So I don't have an issue with beer being available at a hockey game, personally. Secondly, and Pat can speak to this probably better than I think it was last weekend or the weekend before, we had hockey teams from Casper and Colorado Springs playing. We had them in Las Vegas playing. And those are tournaments that could easily be going on in Casper, but without the ice availability, our teams have to leave town. So instead of bringing in those extra teams and getting the hotel and the food and the sales tax and the revenue from it, we're actually supporting other communities going out because we don't have enough ice to be able to do these. So our teams are doing all their traveling. So just thought I'd throw that out there. Amber?
Question, please. It sounds like being able to attract a junior club is gonna be an important part of your plan. And it sounds like you do have preliminary interest in that at least. Do you feel good about our ability to retain a club or, continue to replace clubs as one club leaves, another one comes in? Do you feel good about that as a sustainable source of revenue for the facility?
Mayor, Counselor, I think that's an excellent question, and I wish I could tell you with 100% certainty that yes, we would be able to sustain that forever into perpetuity. I can't make that promise, obviously, but I sort of relate this to baseball. We have a beautiful stadium at Mike Lansing, and we've had several ball clubs through that facility, but there's always interest if one leaves for another one to step in. Casper is a desirable location in the region. It's very central in our state, and it's a stopping point between big cities such as Denver and Billings and into places in Utah. So I have found in my tenure in Parks and Recreation that it is a desirable location for club teams for travel purposes. So, and I believe that would be the same in hockey.
Yes.
Follow up, please.
It's not a follow-up, so if you wanna go to somebody else, then come back.
You've got the floor.
Thank you. Second question would be, of all of the subsidies that we pay or subsidized facilities, if you're gonna spend $4 million anywhere to have the biggest bang for our buck impact on our subsidy picture, would this be it?
Counselor. That is a wonderful question. Wow. Now you're kind of putting me against my other.
Do you mind if Carter takes a crack at it?
Yes, please.
And if you wanna fill in the blanks, man, feel free, that would be great. Counselor, I think that's a good question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Certainly.
Certainly the highest subsidy that we have is with respect to our relationship at the Fort Wyoming Center. And so being able to put an investment in that place to draw that number down would be wonderful, because as you recall, that's about $1 million, give or take, and depending on the performance of the year. The opportunity that we have at Hogadon, for example, while the subsidy might be a little higher, is in my estimation, we've got more of an upside there than we do at the ice arena because we're selling all the ice that we have available. I think we have more options at Hogadon that we are exploring right now and finding benefit in when it comes to our summer season up there. Way more upside. We may not necessarily need to look at investments like this in order to create upside. And so we've got kind of a different discussion with each of our facilities that hopefully we can have, because I'm hoping that some of our implementation strategies that we take on this coming year will resonate with you and give us some opportunities if you give us a green light. So as we look at the rec center, there's other things we should talk about there too that I think would probably be more consistent with what we're talking about at the ice arena, because we don't have as much upside. And the fort is a completely different discussion, as you all know. So I hope that gives you a feel for what I would suggest as answers to your question, because I think it's a good question, but unfortunately not a real easy question to answer. You know what I mean?
I didn't think it'd be.
It's kind of a complex, set of data.
Mayor, councilors, I think the only thing that I would add to that is that I do believe that Hogadon and the ice arena are unique in that we do have the opportunity, I believe, to get to zero subsidy of those facilities with some investment.
And the difference is here we have matching funds or more than matching funds, right? Which is
More than.
right, which creates a different perspective too. I understand that. I just wanted.
It's true.
Counselor Engelbretson.
I guess so, kind of the way I see this is that we are becoming, Casper is starting to become a hub for sports. So we've got the sports complex happening at the event center we have not paid anything for. The school district just put in 10 tennis courts into the park, and we didn't pay for anything like that. So I think that for the city to keep that momentum going, adding $4 million into this, because then this just adds more to our sports, because if we can start bringing in all these regions for the rec center, the hockey, the tennis, and all of that, that's just only going to bolster our economy no matter what. So I think we're gonna get our money back no matter what. So if we can just keep adding to it, because it's happening and we haven't had to pay anything. So I think that for all of it, if you look at all of it combined, $4 million isn't that much.
I agree with you, and keep in mind, we're in a range from 3 to 4.4, so it's not necessarily 4 million, just keep that in mind. Counselor Jensen.
I was gonna say. So I kind of forgot what I was gonna say, because I was kind of going off of what Lisa already covered here. Just talking about that we're becoming this hub as far as sports is concerned and trying to attract more people into our communities. So as far as selling it, are we gonna get the help? Like, you know how Visit Casper sells all those events and helps bring them into here? Are we gonna get that, or can they start helping us to bring in more ice-related things?
Pat, would you like to answer that, or?
Yeah, sure, Travis can.
Travis?
Everybody doesn't know, he's the.
I'm Travis St. John. I'm the president of the Casper Hockey Club. Counselor and mayor, all of that is really pushed by us as far as the advertising for the tournaments and bringing tournaments in. There's huge benefit to us to have the tournaments here, bring the things in locally, because it's really, we can use it as a fundraising opportunity for our club as well, and then not have to travel, in some cases for our teams at that point in time. So certainly we push that as much as we can. What we run into right now, and you'll hear quite a bit, is we're maxed out in the usage of the ice rink now. There's not more ice to sell, and that's going from really through the summer and through the winter months as well.
And that includes practicing till 11 p.m. in order for some of the groups to be able to have ice, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And that's daily during the week, or Monday through Thursday that we're practicing that late. And then when you bring tournaments in, you'll start at 6 a.m. and you'll go till 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And even the weekends in the summer, a lot of times, I mean, Chad's done a really, really good job of selling everything that he possibly can to the Team Wyoming's or the teams and even the Casper ice group that practices a lot more during the summer now too. So long answer to that, yes, it's to our benefit to sell all of that as much as we can too.
And Visit Casper is an absolute yes. They will help market it, and they will help.
Push that sports.
Absolutely, yes, they do. The city manager can verify that, but yes. Did you have something else, Travis?
Yeah, Pat was just saying to add to that, we've also got the opportunity to be more attractive for state tournaments. we do have the 14U and 12U state tournaments that'll be here this year, and there in 14U alone, there's 14 teams that'll be coming in for that tournament, and just gives us a lot more opportunity to draw those here. And just like we're this hub for the state tournaments for basketball and wrestling, I mean, we can move more towards being that for hockey as well.
Can I do a follow-up? Yeah. So I think we learned this just the other day with Chad when we were visiting. So this new the ice maker machine that you showed us over there, that covers the second sheet of ice too, right? Like it'll cover all the making Carter's and yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Counselor Kathy?
The thing that I wanted to mention is we were talking about Hogadon and the ice arena. Basically, we're talking about summer activities at Hogadon, where the winter activities at Hogadon too are so much weather dependent. We've had years that we could start skiing in November and other years that they haven't even opened anything until after the first of the year, where this particular project doesn't matter about the weather. We make our own weather, so to speak. So that is more of a guarantee as far as being able to meet and reduce subsidies than what even Hogadon is. Because, and again, too, even the summer activities, if we have a wet June like we did last year, that cuts into it as well. So I would rather spend the money at the ice arena than I would at Hogadon, even though I am a big Hogadon supporter, so don't crucify me for that.
I'm with you, Steve. I'm a big subsidy guy, and you guys remember the whole wind hinge out at the Casper Museum that got shut down, but I was pushing, because anytime I find a way that we can get rid of subsidies, that's just a win for the city. It frees up tax dollars, and when I first came on council, I remember telling Carter, what's the opportunity of us selling the rec center? Because the subsidy, it's $500,000 a year. It's
near $1 million, I thought.
No, it's a little over $500,000. I think it's $1 million at the Fort Wyoming Center. Am I correct?
Definitely.
Yeah, so anytime we can do away with the subsidy, that's just a win for me. And not only that, but we're also promoting, helping our youth in the community. We're creating places for people to come. There's a whole lot of good that comes from this. So I am a huge proponent of it, by the way. Yes, sir.
And as a follow-up, a couple of other things that I really like about the proposal that Carter made is that we're looking at a fixed dollar amount, not a percentage. So I like that as well, so we know what's going into it. The other thing, and I commend the hockey people for it, is the 18-month time frame. Because I was going to say that if we were going to set a time frame, we need to do it because this is the council that is doing this, and we don't need to go into another council in 2 years. So I would love to see that all taken care of. We either do it or we don't. Well, the 9 of us that are sitting here take care of that. So thank you as well to the hockey club.
Zelina, did you have anything else?
Yes. As I apologize, I should have introduced my staff, who is here to also help answer any questions that you might have. Chad Green is our ice arena supervisor, and Phil Moya is our recreation manager, and so they both oversee the day-to-day operations of the ice arena. And then, of course, our guests from the hockey club, Pat Bauer and Pat St. John.
Thank you. So Carter, I guess at this point, we're looking for direction as if in order to either give a green light so that these folks can go out and start commandeering funds, or this is something we as a council don't want to entertain. Questions? Steve?
I would suggest we either give a yes or a no tonight and give them the dollar amount that we're willing to give them tonight. And then if we need to at a next work session, figure out the exact funding mechanism through which we're going to give it to them.
Well, just so you know, it's important, we are going to give them a yes or a no tonight. We will not give them a dollar amount. We are going to have deeper, bigger discussion. It'll be between 3 and 4.4, we know that, but we have agreed to, if I'm correct, into having much deeper discussions as to where the money comes from and all that before we can put a dollar amount on it. But we will guarantee them, if they get a yes from us tonight, they're going to get at least $3 million. That's kind of where we're at. Am I correct in that?
Mr. Mayor, I can embrace that direction, you
Okay,
bet, sure.
very good.
If that works for our user groups.
Kyle?
Thanks, Bruce. Just want to say I'm glad to hear that because my yes or no hinges on the financing of it.
Sure,
So-
well, mine too, actually.
So I'm totally in support of that. Just one variable for us to consider, because we've talked about a lot this evening. A lot of our counselors made good points about Casper becoming a tourism hub with the addition of tennis courts, the large sports facility. And so just a variable that I think is important for us as we consider this. I don't know if any of y'all saw, but Mayor of Cheyenne last week announced a very large, sounds almost similar to the project that we have going on at the Ford Wyoming Center. Very large sports center with football field, turf, 8 volleyball courts, basketball courts, MMA, tennis courts. And so the other communities in the state are not, sitting on their haunches, not doing anything. They recognize that Casper gets a lot of tourism and a lot of visitors from sports, and so they would like a piece of that. So just something to keep in mind.
Thank you. And another thing I'll add is that's what makes Casper so attractive. Try getting to Laramie or to Cheyenne in the winter. Try to get over Elk Mountain if you live in anywhere on that west side of the state, or even through Medicine Bow. So that's what's so attractive about where we are. So if we can keep furthering the agenda where we're at, we're in a really good spot. So, yes, ma'am.
I know we don't want to get too into the weeds in terms of the exact funding mechanism, but I did want to just give a quick bit of attention. There's a bit in our memo talking about financing options, and in there, there could be a scenario where our payments towards a financed loan could be similar to, or in the neighborhood of what we're currently paying in subsidy. So rather than that money just going to operations, it could be going to improvements in that facility, which, it says it could be more, it could be less, it could be comparable. So obviously the devil's in the details there, but when we think about the possibility to leverage that money that we're already paying into the facility into improvements rather than just annual operations, to me that gets much more interesting and much more justifiable in terms of, rather than just throwing money at it. It's actually will be an improved property by the time we're done with that.
So that we can move on, unless there's further discussion needed, I would propose that we move forward with this and give a thumbs up. But that's certainly up to you guys. So I'd like to see how many would be in favor at this time. Okay, I think you have your direction.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you for coming. Now you got work to do.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Well, moving on, let's get to, if we may, to the what I'd like to do, if you'll look on your agenda. Thank you, guys. If you'll pay attention to your agenda, we're going to skip forward one so that Mr. Friel can get on with his evening, so we don't have to sit through anymore. I know he loves it. I'd like to move on to the Flagpole residential lots, and let's get that done so Steve can go home, and then, because you stay anyway, right, Steve?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's do that. If we may, please, Mr. City Manager, Flagpole lots and residential areas.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Thank you, everybody. And welcome, Mr. Chairman. Good to have you.
Thank you.
Although he's not representing county tonight. The question before the council is whether or not the situation as, described there in the exhibit on your screen could be improved with regard to property access to streets and street corridors by changing ordinance that would allow exactly what you're seeing here tonight. Because with regard to current ordinance and current requirements, that type of access is not permissible. And it's called a flag lot type situation because of the shape, basically, that that you permit with regard to properties that are kind of boxed in, as it were, otherwise, in order to gain access to an adjacent street. We had this issue brought forward by Mr. Friel a few weeks back to your previous council, actually. And Ms. Becker is here tonight to fill in any of the technical blanks that perhaps I may have left out in my setting of this table for this matter for your consideration this evening. And so, if I could, Mr. Vice Mayor. Oh, there you are, okay. I didn't know where you went.
Ms. Becker, if you would please. I'm just stretching out, buddy. I just had surgery. So.
My peripheral vision is so
I'm sorry.
Mayor, Counselor, Greg and I are both back, so we were upstairs watching, so didn't know there was gonna be a change, so. It came booking down. The power of the screen. Seriously. Yes, and the police department is like, whoa, we were running through security. Okay, so Carter did tee it up quite well. The citizen did request that we look at, really this, I got setbacks on the brain, I'm so sorry. On what the, minimum required widths are for flag lots pertaining to residential developments. And so Craig had put this one together. It's a little bit different than the one that was in your council packet. But again, in this particular diagram, you've got your main street, you've got the curb cut to allow a 12-foot, which is our recommendation, to go into truly this flag lot, but still a separate curb cut with a 12-foot recommendation to go into another lot. There is benefit to doing so within a residential area, curbing sprawl, actually allowing maximization of the lot as opposed to not having as much access to the front lot. But there's also some issues brought up in the cons in the particular memo is you're gonna lose some on-street parking by allowing these additional curb cuts to come in. We, as staff, recommended the 12-foot as an idea to get discussion going for what a residential width could be for, if you will, a driveway. And with the commercial property, we like to have the 12-foot lanes so that we can get fire truck activity in there if there is a need at a commercial property. But that's also with a commercial property with the understanding that we're gonna have two-way traffic in a commercial. With residential, unless it's one heck of a party, it's gonna pretty much be a one-lane access. So staff did, for purposes of discussion, recommend 12-foot. And we have talked with the fire department to see if that would be sufficient width for their trucks to be able to get into a single-family residential development. So that's what we're tossing out today for discussion purposes and really looking at direction. Again, this would be another ordinance change that we would then prepare for you and bring that forward. But the width is up for discussion this evening by all means. But again, this is what we put together kind of as a diagram.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. Councilor Engelbretson?
So I know that this is just particularly for the downtown area and for the homes that have, or the lots that have the two homes. So my curiosity is more about the setbacks because you're almost eliminating setbacks.
City Planner Colin?
Councilors, we consider the front setback on the flag lot here, so you would still have to meet the 15 or 18-foot front setback for this house, 10-foot to the rear, something that we would measure off the front of this one.
The driveway is,
The driveway is, you can include that in the setback. So, this doesn't count against you.
so that doesn't count against you? Okay.
Councilor Cathy?
What do we have, now is that gonna be an easement or is that actually gonna be property ownership when we do this? Is my first question.
Every lot has to have frontage on a street, so it has to be part of the lot.
Okay, so that would be ownership.
Ownership.
Okay, now, if that is ownership, what winds up being the setbacks along the sides of that strip?
Typically, it would still be the same. It would still be sides, 10 feet or 5 feet on the sides, but we wouldn't anticipate anybody building in this area because there's not adequate area. The building portion would be.
So they can pave over the whole 12 foot.
Correct.
Now, from a legal standpoint, as a continuing
Certainly,
follow-up along
certainly.
these lines, where can you put snow?
On your own lot.
So now, if we have a snow like we just had, and you only have 12 feet there, are you gonna be able to get a fire truck down that street?
If snow's in the way, no.
That's my concern about 12 feet. Because, and the reason I bring this up is we've been through the narrow streets up in Gosfield, is that what it's called? We've been through this issue up there to when we wind up with snow, they can't get to fire, they've got to send a snowplow with a fire truck to be able to get into the residences.
Well-
And that becomes my concern.
And I understand your concern, but I will tell you, there are homes along Poplar, for instance, that have 10-foot wide driveways on the houses that are set back. You're not getting a fire truck in there either. The fire truck can park on the street and run hose. That's what they have hose on their trucks for, and they find themselves in that position quite often, I'm assuming, right, Chief Black?
Mr. Mayor, yes, we train for that all the time.
Thank you. So, yeah, so I don't know that it's nearly as bad as it sounds. I'm more concerned about helping our property owners, especially in the downtown area, that are kind of landlocked, that have two homes and they can't even access them. I don't think that's fair. And now, by this ordinance, if I'm right, Ms. Becker, will now put us in compliance with what our commercial already says. So it'll just be a uniform code for now residential and commercial, correct?
Mayor, correct, just different widths,
Okay, thank you.
minimums.
As
Sure.
a follow-up to that,
Sure.
on the ones downtown, that's okay. But I'm concerned about new developments coming along. If we make this citywide, that I start going out now and instead of putting in extra streets, I put in 12-foot wide flag lots in new residential developments, which is, to me, is not building a city. It is then working on the, and pardon me, but working on the greed of developers.
Lisa, do you want to respond?
Yeah, so as the new neighborhoods get developed, you have developers and you have covenants and things like that. So this is strictly for downtown. It is not going to affect anywhere else.
If
And
this is strictly for downtown, I have no problem with that, because those are,
in reality is,
existing and they do
very few
fall into
people are
what
gonna spend the money
Marinell
to
is
do this,
talking
right?
about. But
Yeah.
I could see some developers trying to do this in new developments just to save money on building streets and sewers. And that, I think, is destroying the quality of life in our city.
They have to come through the planning and zoning.
Well, if we make this an ordinance citywide, unless planning and zoning says no, they can do it because it will be codified in ordinance that I can have flag lots with 12-foot poles.
Counselor Jensen?
And I noticed Ms. Becker shaking her head yes.
You stated what I was gonna say.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Counselor Gamroth?
Thanks, Bruce. To Steve's point, I agree, there's nothing in the ordinance that restricts this to downtown, and so if we have in mind that this should be used exclusively for a specific area of town, I think that needs to be reflected in the ordinance.
Craig, is there a problem in restricting this to current built lots like this that are within the downtown area? Is that a possibility? It sounds like that's the way the council's kind of headed.
I think it's possible, but I'd use an example of cul-de-sacs too, like what we're seeing on the east side. Get to the end of a cul-de-sac and you often have kind of a deep buildable area there that you can't really get to because the cul-de-sac is such a narrow, you have such narrow frontage requirements along there. So this allows you to have additional lots in the end of a cul-de-sac to get more buildable lots out of it too. So it does have application in other areas besides the downtown, so I just wanted to mention that.
Okay. Well, if there's no further discussion, we need some direction. I personally am in favor of it. I like the idea of allowing people that are in a situation like this and people that are building cul-de-sacs. I wouldn't even be opposed to somebody doing that. They don't wanna put a street in, they wanna put in longer driveways and build more houses for more people to live in Casper, because there's no place to live here. I'm certainly not opposed to that either, but it's gonna be really hard to sell a tiny little house with another house right next to you and their driveway coming right by your bedroom. So for me personally, this feels more like something that is already in existence, and we're just trying to help with the problem. That's kind of how I'm seeing it. Did you have something?
I do. So I don't see anywhere where it specifies it for single residence either. So if we do worst case scenario and assume this moves forward for current, what stops it from being a fourplex in the back, and then you have a single?
Zoning.
Excellent question.
Very astute.
Very astute.
We were just talking to the fire department about that today, so I think before, once we got your direction, I think we would probably tweak the ordinance a little bit to specify that it's single family only for the 12 feet, and if it's any more than that, it needs to go up to 24.
Excellent.
Be nice. Look at me.
Look.
Running in here, guys.
Okay, you do too. You guys do too.
So can I assume then that the direction you're asking for is a favorable for single-family dwellings at 12 feet? Is that fair, Ms. Becker?
Oh, yeah, I thought you were asking.
No, I'm asking you.
I apologize, Mr. Mayor. Yes, you are correct in what you
Okay.
just stated
Do,
or asked.
can I get a direction forward? All in favor? Very good. There you are, ma'am.
Now you can spend some more money.
Yeah, so that will come to us in a city council meeting, and we'll pass it as an ordinance.
Yes, sir.
And it'll be written with the exemptions for the fourplex. It'll be for single family, and if they want to go higher, it'll, okay, very good. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Friel.
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful, Brandy. Nice addition.
Look at me. I'm on a roll today.
I like it. I like it. Moving on, we're gonna have to go back here to number 4 with the fire safe rooms. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This too is also a follow-up item that was brought forward a number of months back. Council asked for some homework, as it were, with regard to this possibility, wherein the council posed a question of whether or not it would be appropriate to A, create safe rooms or rooms of refuge, if you will, in fire stations, or B, wire the stations in such a way that only cameras would be initiated, or C, some option of a mix of perhaps some fire stations doing some improvements and others not. Is what we took anyway from staff's perspective, as it was relating to that direction. We have done some homework, and we've certainly looked into statistics from a crime perspective and the incidence of those kinds of things occurring around fire stations throughout the last 3 to 5 years, I believe it was, if I remember correctly. And so with regard to some of that data that we wanted to return a report back to you, both the chief of the fire department and the police departments have put some of that information together. And so who would like to go up first? Chief Black? Yeah. If it's okay, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
Mr. Mayor, councilors.
Thank you.
So yeah, we put together some homework on some numbers for these added public safety measures of fire station cameras on the perimeter of all of our stations and an emergency phone outside of the front entrance to all the stations. If you all recall the safe room discussion on the utilization of those and the feasibility of those, the cost of those, and that firemen are not trained like the police department, and we don't want to be inviting things like that into our station and possibly have those situations. So we came up with the homework of just not looking at the safe rooms and looking at the cameras and the ring down phones. I got a rough estimate through our IT department, and they gave us an estimate of 6 cameras on the perimeter of each station, with 1 central server and annual maintenance cost, and then the drop-down phones for all stations. To do the cameras, we're looking at $57,000 for all 5 stations. That gives us 6 perimeter cameras at every station, the server. And then we'll have a $900 annual cost just for the surveillance system, for them to maintain it, make sure it's up to date and taken care of properly. The ring down phones is roughly a little less than $10,000. That includes the phone, an exterior weatherproof box, custom signage so that people understand what it's for and what it's being used for, and then the installation. And that some of that's going to be a little flexible on how much those installations cost, because we do have brick that we have to go through and put them on. So it's hard to get that solid estimate for that. But all in all, for all 5 fire stations, we're looking at $66,375 to do all of that. And then in reference to the homework that we looked at, the different calls that our police department has gone on at our fire stations, Chief McFeeters, he's got some information for that. And before he speaks on that, do you guys have any questions?
If I may, Chief, I like the idea of having cameras on our fire stations, especially for that, what seems very minimal amount of money. Not only for the protection of our citizens, but for the protection of our firemen and our properties as well. I really like the idea. I am not sold on the phones, so I'm really curious how you feel about that. Everybody in this day and age I don't know a human being that doesn't have a cell phone. I don't know of a human being that can't call 911. I have an issue with these phones being on the outside of the buildings, 1, for vandalism, 2, for all of the, and I can already see it happening, draining our resources by kids or ne'er-do-wells abusing these phones, whatever it is. I just think it's a bad idea, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on it.
Mr. Mayor, that's a very good question. Personally, we all have, in my professional opinion, the things that I've seen happen to public telephones and things that people have access to when eyes aren't around in the middle of the night, I see the phones causing more problems than it's going to be a pretty extensive cost and time investment to get those installed, and then the domino effect of what happens after that, I cannot predict the replacement of those, the maintenance of those, the issues that we may come up with.
Ron, keep in mind, just for the new counselors, we've had 1 incident in how many years? 25 at a fire station, 1. And I'm assuming that person had a phone as well on their person. They were trying to drive and they were trying to escape a domestic situation, so I understand that. But by the time she pulled in, or she would have been on camera, we would have had the perpetrator on camera, and then she could have made her call from her cell phone. But let's take that 1 instance that we've had. She has to get out of her car now with a domestic violence situation and expose herself to the outside to try to get to this phone. So to me, the phones are just worthless. And like I said, everybody's got one. So I'm sold on the cameras, just not on the phones, and for the same reasons that you said. Mr. Gamaroth?
Thanks, Bruce. I echo kind of your concerns with the phones. Everyone's got one on their person, so I'm not interested in that. And as far as the surveillance system, you just reminded us that there's been 1 incident in the past 20, 25 years, and so even that is not something that I feel is warranted at this time. I do think it's important to recognize that, yeah, it's $55,000 for the initial installation, but hard drives die, servers need replaced every 7 to 10 years. This is not a one-time fee. Tech always ages out, and so we are committing to, it's not just the $900 a month annual system maintenance. That might be subscriptions or licensing or something. I don't know exactly what that is, but this equipment all needs replaced on a routine basis, and so we are committing to, lifetimes of tech replacement if we were to go down that route. So to me, it hasn't been shown that if we had this retroactively in the past, that it would have given us much benefit as a city, and so that's why I'm not convinced we need it going forward.
Well, I would agree with you in part, but I do like the idea of the protection it gives us for our facilities and our buildings as well. And I would be curious how many times has a fire truck in an emergency situation, came out of their lights blaring, and a car runs into them. Or we have an issue there that would have been caught on camera and exonerated the city from a lawsuit, or, you know, whatever. How many times have we found damage to our buildings that we just suck it up, get it fixed, and pay for it because we don't know what happened or how it happened? These cameras would, I just think they would offer us a lot more protection than just helping out our public. But that's just my thought, anyway. Hang on just a second. Go ahead.
Follow up if I could, thanks.
Yes.
I guess my assumption was that the report that we got from the chief in regards to the frequency of these incidents would have included vandalism, property damage, things like that. And so I see the chief nodding his head, and so if that's his perspective, that it's not just incidents with individuals, but also property crime and all the, you know, it just doesn't seem like there's a history of that occurring, and so that's why.
Thank you for that. Is that true, Chief? The one incident we had was that it, period?
Mayor,
Sir?
as soon as Chief Black is done, I'll try to address as best as I can the nature of the calls.
Very good. Okay. Lisa?
So I just want to point out the difference cost of replacing fire stations and the cost of replacing things as things happen. And so it is for the citizens, but it's also protect our multi-million-dollar asset. And so there's all sorts of kind of things happen. But I also want to point out that just in the news here recently, Florida, they put in a safe room for babies, and was like 2.5 years, never used, and then they just recently just had a baby placed into it. So they felt like certain things, cameras and things like that, was an asset. And so, I mean, how we have a $15 million building and not a camera on it is beyond me. That is just beyond me. And so, to me, the $55,000, I don't think the phones are necessary, but cameras I do think are necessary. We spend a lot of money for these, and I think cameras are the basic bare minimum we need to do.
Thank you. Mr. Bond?
Just a clarification on the cameras, are these cameras that would need to be monitored by somebody at all times, or are they just for recording purposes?
Recording purposes.
So if somebody had an accident, say on 12/24 at 5 p.m., we can go back through the server, pull that up, and it's that monitoring is what it is. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Chief, do you have anything else, or, I'm sorry, did I miss? Sorry, Amber, please.
Yeah, I feel a little bit like we're talking about two different things here, one of which is cameras or mechanisms for safety of our citizens, and one of which is for our properties. And so I guess I'm just curious about like what the intention is, because we don't have cameras that I know of on other properties. So if we have a concern about city properties being damaged, like that's not where this conversation started. It started with like public safety, right? So I feel like we're maybe trying to address too many things at once, or not in a cohesive, like thoughtful way in terms of like what are the fire stations prime targets for property damage of the city, or are there other properties that would rise higher in that priority list? So I think we should just clarify, like, what are we trying to accomplish here?
Okay, so to answer that, in fairness, the cameras initially were discussed because of that incident that we had, that domestic violence incident at the station. I took us down the rabbit hole just by saying, well, if we're going to put them up, we also get extra benefits that we hadn't even talked about. So it is kind of going down in different directions, but it's all still the same. It's if we have those cameras for those situations, they're also going to give us visibility on our buildings. They're also going to protect us in the event that the building gets harmed. We're going to have, I was just trying to find other reasons for it, or other advantages for it, if you will. So, but yes, you are correct. It was initially brought up because of that situation. Anything else, Chief?
Mr. Mayor, no.
Okay, Mr. McFeeters, if I may, Mr. City Manager.
Oh, please,
Okay,
absolutely.
good. Yeah.
Mayor, councilors, thank you. So we were tasked with doing a little bit of research, trying to find out just what is happening at our fire stations. So we ran 5 years worth of numbers, 5 complete years worth of numbers, and this was up through November 9th, so that 5th year is a little bit incomplete. But in 5 years, pretty much across the board with all 5 of our fire stations, there's about 40 calls for police services. Now, before you get excited about, oh, that sounds like a lot, you gotta subtract out the traffic crashes that the firemen hear the bang and the screech of tires and they call us, and so that counts. The found property, the firemen go out to shovel the sidewalk and they find somebody's purse, and so they call that in. So when you subtract all of those out, roughly speaking, in the last 5 years, we've had 8 of what you would call a potential police involvement type thing. When you take out of those the suspicious circumstances, somebody's driving by and they say, I saw somebody that was making me nervous and they were last seen walking by the fire department. Now we're getting down to just a handful of things. So there has been 1 motor vehicle theft. I can't tell you if that was a fireman's motor vehicle because the point I'm trying to make, so little crime has occurred on our fire departments. No record of vandalism, except for our CSO vehicles out in the parking lot just last year, I think that was. That's the only record of vandalism that we have. So there's so little crime that we're really down to averaging less than one actual real crime per year across to all of our 5 fire stations. So we have a couple of circumstances, suspicious persons, a couple of circumstances of an intoxicated person, and I'm sure the fire department called up the police and said, hey, there's a guy, he's gonna need a ride. And so really just there's not that much to report. And I have no record of city damage whatsoever except for our CSO vehicles.
Chief, I'd like to ask you a question then. In your professional opinion, the fact that fire department is manned 24 hours a day, there's always somebody there, unless they're out on a call. It sounds to me like this is something we probably don't need. Is that a fair assessment?
Mayor, council, you've asked for an opinion and I'll give you an opinion. There's not a lot of crime going on. Boy, there are other places in the city I would love to have cameras. So in fairness, one of the things that council asked me to look into was which ones of the fire stations are the most active. Without question, Station 3 gets the most things happening on it. It's just the proximity of that neighborhood, the major traffic volumes right there. Station 3 by far and away, you add up Station 3 accounts for 15 of those calls just by itself in the last 15 years. I'm of the opinion that so little crime is happening that we should be asking ourselves, do we need to do this? But I'm also going to render an absolute opinion of we love video. It saves our rear end. When we can get it, is a game changer. And so I'm not opposed to the more, the way our society is going, pretty soon you're gonna have drones just flying 24 hours a day, giving overhead coverage of everything. So video is in and of itself is not a bad thing to have. But you are hearing an opinion from me that our fire stations are one of the safest places to be in our community.
Well, council, with that said, it's up to us to give direction to move forward with spending the money or to not do so. Mr. Cathy?
Can I ask one more question of Chief Black?
Of course you can.
How do you feel about the cameras for security? We've heard that you don't have any issues. What is your opinion?
In my opinion, I echo that video can always be beneficial, even though we may not need it, and there's not a big occurrence of it. It's always better to have it when we need it. And that will come to that initial cost and the continued cost. And it's not gonna be just something we can snap our fingers and make happen. But, in my opinion, if we need the video, it's there.
Thank you.
Councilor Gamroth.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm gonna advocate that we vote no on it this evening because I think we've heard more than enough that it's probably not warranted. That being said, I'm intrigued by Chief McFeeters' comment that there are some areas of town he would love to have cameras. that's something I would potentially like to revisit in a future work session or something, so.
Well, if you don't mind, why don't we put that get the chief on a future work session so that we can have some discussions about some possible areas that they may be warranted or usable? And there's kind of a so-called quasi-motion on the floor to not accept this. So is there anyone in favor of spending the money to put the cameras on the stations at this time? Please give a thumbs up. No, that is in favor of spending the money and putting the cameras on. Is there anyone else?
All right, I'll be with you, Lisa.
Solidarity.
Okay, so it looks like the direction is to not move forward with the cameras or the phones at this time. So, and Lisa, I feel for you, I do. I know it's very close to you, and I understand that. And thank God we do have phones and other means, but anyway, we will move on to the FY23 budget amendment number 2, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilors, you are aware that amendments are a necessary part of keeping track of the activity of the budget through any given fiscal year. It's very, very unusual to not have amendments, given that it's real difficult to try to make sure at the beginning of the budget year, particularly, in April and May, when we're trying to prognosticate what the activity of the budget is going to be over the next 15 months, that we always get it right without need for change. So that is not the case for fiscal year 23. We are halfway through it. It's very typical that we have an amendment to sort of adjust things to our reality. And Ms. Johnson is here to tell us what those adjustments need to be. And so with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to turn the time over to Ms. Johnson.
Yes, please welcome Jill.
Thank you.
Nice word.
Which one?
Prognosticate.
Oh.
That one away.
Here, counselors. So there are a few items within the budget amendment that I would like to draw your attention to. A lot of this is just making a little bit of adjustment to the numbers that we didn't know how they were gonna turn out, so we're making some adjustments. But we are making a lot of corrections. So when we originally rolled the budget over for all of our capital expenses, we rolled a lot of the expenses, the appropriation, but we didn't roll the revenue that we had not yet received. So when we looked at that and said, oh, well, we have the expense there, but we haven't got the revenue in the budget, you are gonna see some of those types of things in this amendment as well. So it is not an appropriation to put revenue in, but it does make our reserves, we can calculate those then, because we're not just having all the expense and none of the revenue. So there is quite a bit of that within this amendment. There is also, we have the CDBG grants that you guys approved last year. There was one for the Food for Thought, and the second one is for the Housing Authority. They are starting to move forward on those, we believe, so we are going to put in the expense side of that, and there will be an offsetting revenue for those as well. As soon as we spend the money, we will get the money back. So there is a $1.25 million expense there, so that's a pretty large one. Again, if you kind of go a little bit further into here, you'll see the revenue adjustments. We have the old landfill that we have the expense in there, but we don't have the offsetting revenue that we would get back from the state. So we did put that $2 million in there in revenue. And we also had some user fees when we did the water and sewer revenues that were coming in. We did not add in the adjustment to the rate, so we needed to add those in as well, and that was 1.4. So those are some of the bigger items. One of the things that I think I've never seen before, which is kind of interesting, in our financial considerations on the back page, the total net impact of this budget amendment is actually an increase in revenue. So that's pretty neat. So it's a $2.2 million increase in revenue overall. So we are asking for some of the expense to be in here. It's gonna be a $3.8 million expense increase, but we do have a lot of revenue to offset that. So with that, do you have any questions?
It's pretty straightforward.
Sir.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Of
course.
Am I hearing you say, Jill, that the net effect of this amendment is actually an increase in revenue over and above all the expenses that this memo and table lays out?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That is very unusual, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure I've seen that in my 25 years of doing this business.
Not prognosticate that.
I would have never prognosticated that outcome.
I would have not either. I think that's the first time I've ever seen it as well. But again, like I said, we did have a lot of the expense already in the budget. We just didn't have that revenue offsetting in there. So that's what's causing a lot of that.
Yeah.
That's good.
How did you get the printing press to make this money?
Magic, right?
Listen, after being on Joint Powers Board and seeing the magic she's done, I can't even believe you're questioning, honestly.
Are there any other questions?
I don't believe so. You're looking for some direction, so if everybody's okay with the budget amendment? Okay, very good. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, you will see that come forward on the floor next meeting, is that right, Jill? Or-
Yes.
Okay.
To be ratified.
To be formally adopted,
Sure.
yep, you bet.
Yes,
It'll
sir.
be a public hearing.
Next week?
Thank you. Okay, moving on to boards and commissions. I'm sorry.
Very quickly, to go along with some of what was all in here, primarily for the 3 new council members, that whenever a project is approved, the money is set aside, and the revenue and the expense kind of go together because the money is there, but then if it winds up not being done in that fiscal year, it gets carried over. And what some of this was is the expense got carried over, but the revenue forgot to come along. So that's part of what all of this is. So when you see the project carries forward, that's because of the way the city takes care of their money and that it all has to be reallocated for the new fiscal year.
Correct. You'll also see situations where $2 million was allocated to have a street redone, and because of weather or whatever, they didn't get to it that year, so it gets moved on to the next year, and the money has to be moved. And so it's all stuff that's been pre-approved, and like she said, we're actually showing a plus. That's very odd, but welcoming by all stretches of the imagination.
But I did want to let the 3 new ones
Sure, and I
know
appreciate that,
that's
Steve. Thank you very
kind of-
much. Thank you for that. Okay, moving on to boards and commissions. I'm assuming I just take off, huh?
That's you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So we made some new assignments for the incoming folks. I did reach out to you and I did ask you for some specific help on some of the things that you wanted. And then we just made some assignments on others. So we're going to go over those tonight. They'll be up on the screen for us here in just a minute, but you should have this in front of you in your packet today, and this will explain to you. So once you find out what board you're on, this will explain to you the responsibilities of being on that board and commission. And as you go further into it, it'll also let you know when they meet, how often, and the times. And I would urge you to put those in your calendar because I've missed a few, especially in the very beginning, just because I simply forgot. And so it's always good to, if you have a calendar, to put reminders in there. So we'll go over those real quick. And while she's pulling that up, I'm also going to hand these out to you. What we did when Steve and Ray were mayor is we, for transparency's sake, we have a leadership meeting before every work session and every city council meeting. And so what we do is we invite and that leadership meeting generally consists of myself, the vice mayor, and the city manager. And so what we do is we invite a counselor in also each week so that they could partake in those and just kind of, just transparency reasons so everybody knows what's going on. These were organized by ward and then by alphabetical order. So you'll see some of you have 3 and some have 4, but it's simply whatever word you're in and however it came out alphabetically. But if you would mind passing those, take one and pass it around, Amber. And that'll just let you know when you're up. Yes, ma'am.
I'm on the finance committee.
Uh-huh.
And so we need to either, can we change the time to sooner, like 10 or later? Because I also have visit Casper at 11:30, so I'm at the finance at 11 and then visit Casper 11:30.
The finances
On
is
the
a
same
need
day.
as needed, isn't it?
We're supposed to have a meeting
It's coming up next
on the
week.
24th at 11 o'clock.
We could certainly change the time of that, like a half an hour earlier would help you.
Or an hour, just however long
What time's it set for?
lasts.
11.
So it's at
Could we do
11.
that at 10, Jill?
We could,
I'm not gonna do it.
Okay. We'll reach out via email to all those on that committee, because I'm on there as well.
Okay.
And Renee will get something to us. Probably just move it up an hour.
Okay.
So that you can,
That's fine.
thank you for bringing that to my attention. Okay, so if you'll look at these, now, just enter in,
They didn't give
Jenna, I know you're gonna be on the OYD now. You took Amber's spot on the OYD. So you're on both OYD, the architectural
Yes.
and the,
Yes, that's.
okay? And then, Amber, I know you're on the Amico Joint Powers Board now.
Yes.
But so as far as sitting council members, and then Mr. Kathy, you are now on the Planning and Zoning Commission?
Yep.
So for the previous counselors, those were the only changes, just Amber and Steve that I'm aware of. And so please find your name up there, see what you're
Second.
on. Mr. Bond, I think we put you on the Solid Waste Committee, the Code Enforcement Appeals Committee, which both of those are meet as needed. So what they will do is, knowing that you're on there, if they have a situation or need to call a meeting, they'll contact you. They usually give you plenty of time. You will also notice Paul Bertolio, and I think I'd already told everybody, but we appointed him. We have some litigation stuff in the Regional Water System Board, and he has great experience with us, so we reappointed him to help us navigate through with Amber, Steve, and I. Where else? So Brandy, you are on the Health Department, which I believe you asked for. You're also on the Natrona County Liquor Dealers Association, which is currently defunct, but I believe didn't we talk about this, and we're gonna see if we can't.
Streamlined.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so Brandy, every third Thursday of every month at 5:30 PM. And you'll have to look in your packet to see where they meet.
Okay.
I'm guessing it's probably at the health department, but you'll have to look. Bruce and Steve swap spaces on the national finals because Steve will be gone for a wedding. But we're both very much involved in it, though. That's a fun one. Can you scroll down?
I'll take it.
Oh, was there one up in the upper right that I missed on Brandy?
Finance, I got it.
Okay, yep, and so we'll be meeting is it next week?
Yes, no, the 24th.
24th, okay.
Time to be determined, right?
TBD, yep, we'll send an email out, and it'll probably just move up an hour, hopefully, but we'll have to see what Carter's schedule looks like. Okay, if you wouldn't mind, let's see. Jenna is there on, can you scroll down up just a little bit? Oh, that's the OYD advisory and the architectural, okay? Then Mr. Kathy, Amber's new appointment. Is that it? That's it. So everybody generally has about 4 or 5. Mr. Bond, I think you got off really easy because yours are all meet as needed.
Oh, wait a minute.
I think we can fix that.
Well, we certainly could, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind if there's something somebody wants to give up, because I can tell you, the 6 that are sitting here now we're very overzealous, and we're very much, everybody does more than their part for the city. And yes, ma'am.
I would be happy if he wants to take the senior center.
Oh, no, wait a minute.
You wanna do that?
Discrimination.
Mr. Bond, would you be interested? When does that one meet, Lisa?
It's actually meeting, I believe next week, next Monday.
Fourth Monday at 2.
Okay, so Mr. Bond, you'll need to be there next Monday at 2 and get with Lisa. She'll tell you where to be and she can kind of give you an overview of what they do. But it's important that we as city members show up to our meetings and have our presence, because there's a lot of times that they will, and the reason that we only have one on there is, the idea is if there's something pertinent or important, we bring it back to council. Yes, sir.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay.
I essentially just wanted to make sure that we covered that. So this council's been really good. I wouldn't say necessarily the same about past councils, but this council's been really good about our liaisons to these boards. In my opinion, part of the intent is that you go to these boards, you kind of take all that information, and then you come back to us and summarize it. We don't have the ability to be everywhere all the time and learn everything, and so I really appreciate the liaisons to the other boards I'm not a part of when they come back to council and just do a good job distilling what the content of the meeting was and anything that might be relevant or pertinent to the other things that we're discussing. I get a lot of value out of that personally, and I think this council has done a really good job keeping each other informed on what's going on in all these individual organizations.
And it also brings up a good point that, if there is something big going on in one of these departments, we've already been privy to it because somebody told us. And we generally use our council around the table, which we have at the end of every city council meeting and work session, to say, hey, I had a joint powers board meeting today and here's what we discussed. And, just kind of brings everybody up to speed. So it is important. And if you're not going to be able to make them, please reach out to me via email, and I will see if I can get someone else to cover it, or I'll do it myself, because we do not want city representation in our boards and committees. They're there for a reason. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, I have a new conflict with MPO that I'm trying to sort out, because I'd rather not leave that committee, as I'm just now figuring out what we do there. So I'd like to stay, but can we put a little question mark by that one and let me see if I can shuffle some
Fleur,
things
can you
for the
make a note of
time
that,
being, and then
please?
If I can't, I'll let you know and
Okay, please.
get somebody there.
Okay, yep. And then, Fleur, if you could also switch Mr. Bond and Mrs. Ingebretson. Okay, great, awesome. Are there any other questions concerning,
We'll take care of it.
what's that?
I had one thing. She was wanting to be the alternate to CNFR.
She what? Well, she can't be this year, unless you're willing to give it up.
No, it's too much fun.
Well, he's only gone for the actual event, but you'll still be.
Right, that's the only event I wanna.
Yeah, but all the work,
Alternate, just that one.
all the work
just
that he'll do
day.
up to there will be worthy.
I can give you my season tickets if you would like, so
Listen,
you can go to the rodeo.
They do have a government night that we will all go to, and they introduce us to the crowd. They'll, so we do participate somewhat.
The one thing that I wanted to bring up is a follow-up to Councilor Gamroth's comment about bringing things back to us, is that periodically these boards and committees are interested in what we're doing, and if we're talking about something coming up that may affect them. So it is a two-way street. And so anything we talk about other than executive session is public knowledge, so you can speak about anything except what we talk about in executive sessions.
Yes, ma'am.
Such as the health department's Get Healthy Week, right? That memo? That's kind of the stuff that goes on, right?
Yep.
I didn't see that.
Let the public information.
Right.
Healthy Natrona County, something like that. You're gonna know.
Also, please, if you are not going to make a work session or a council meeting, please email me ahead of time so that we know you're going to be gone. We have never not excused anyone for missing, but when you signed up for this, you signed up to be here 4 times a month, and it's important that you're here because we touch on some extremely important stuff. And if you miss one, even a work session especially, that following Tuesday when we're trying to get stuff done on the floor, it makes it very difficult. So, yes, ma'am.
And I just want to propose to Amber, if you need an alternate for MPO, I can still just be your alternate, if that would help ease some of your
Oh, that's
conflict.
nice.
Cool, thanks, yeah, let me figure out if I can shuffle some things, and otherwise, yeah, that would help. Okay, thanks.
Awesome, thank you. So, make note of that too, if you would, please. Thank you, Fleur. Any other concerns? And does everybody understand the leadership meetings? Those happen in Carter's office. If it's a work session, we meet half an hour before, so 4 o'clock in his office. And if it's a council meeting, we meet at 5:30, or no, excuse me, at 5 before the pre-meeting at 5:30. So if it's a council meeting, we'll meet in Carter's office at 5, and if it's a work session, we'll meet there at 4. And you do not have to come, you are not required, but you are welcome to be there if your name is on that day. Yes,
Do we
ma'am.
get calendar invites again on these, or is this our invite?
No, you'll get calendar invites from Renee. She wanted me to, or actually I asked her to print this out so that you would all have it and could plan accordingly ahead of time.
Okay.
Because usually your calendar invites, a week ahead of time? So this kind of gives you an overview of the entire year. And then if you happen to be gone, you know you're gonna be gone, shoot, I'm gone August. Maybe somebody will trade with you, whatever, if these interest you. They can be very interesting sometimes, so sometimes you get a little more backstory than you get in these meetings, I guess, but, okay. Yes, sir.
I hadn't paid any attention to it, but we were scheduled for a regular council meeting on the 4th of July. Are we gonna do that?
No, we will not.
Just thought I might bring that up.
No, the mayor says absolutely not
Okay.
on the 4th of July unless you want me running an inebriated meeting. I'm just kidding.
Well,
But no, I'm sure that's an oversight. I don't imagine that we will be here on the 4th of July.
do we need to do something special because of the way we pay bills every 2 weeks? That would be bills and claims, so will we have to have a special meeting either before or after or something, so
Likely,
just,
especially the first one of the months. That's quite likely, but
exactly.
I'll let Carter go to work on that, and
Okay.
we'll have an answer for you hopefully by Tuesday night. But we've got plenty of time to plan, so.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving on. Legislative agenda, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry.
This is predominantly about liquor, like I think 3 out of our 4 things we're talking to Wham about were all liquor related, is that correct?
Well, as long as you don't comment on them, I think you're fine. It's a work session, so as long as you don't comment on them, I think you're okay.
Okay, as long as I'm not making anybody feel uncomfortable. Sit there.
I think so. She
Yeah,
can.
as long as you just don't comment on them, I think you're more than fine. So, because this is legislative stuff that's public knowledge.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Counselors, we have had a segment of this work session agenda dedicated to discussing legislative issues now for probably, I don't know, maybe 3 years. And it's not always that we have something to talk about throughout an entire year, if you will, every other Tuesday night. But certainly as we're getting into the legislative session, they very recently convened officially. The first part of the calendar year is pretty intensive as it relates to legislative matters and legislative issues. You'll notice that bills come and go, bills get changed, ideas get brought up that we're never aware of until they are mentioned in the media or through our contacts at WHAM, the association. And so what we do is we try our best to make sure that the representations that we make, particularly to our contacts with WHAM, but certainly with regard to our contacts with the legislators from this county, is consistent with what your collective view is on the number of matters that you probably reviewed in your packet leading up to tonight's discussion. Our goal tonight is to, again, review what we know the legislative agenda to be, particularly as it relates to WHAM's efforts, so that as we go down to the WHAM conference here coming up at the end of the month, and as we engage our legislators from here on out, we don't feel like as staff, we're getting ahead of all of you as to what your official direction is. Now, again, remember that this can be a very, very fluid process. And so we're going to need to talk about this probably more than once, which is, the impetus behind getting this item on your regular agenda sort of template, if you will, because things do change and things do come up and directions change and everything else. Jolene, as you probably know, is kind of our point person as it relates to keeping track of the legislative items and communicating fairly directly with WHAM. I am on the Legislative Leadership Committee with WHAM, and oftentimes I get access to things that occur and information that's relevant and new and so on. And so between the two of us, we'll try to keep you as informed as we possibly can. It may not always be in this setting. It may be by virtue of emails and so forth that we send out to you to keep you abreast of what's happening. You'll see emails potentially from WHAM directly as well. Be aware of all those communication opportunities because it can happen pretty fast and furious and oftentimes make you feel like you're out of the loop. You wouldn't be alone because sometimes we feel out of the loop because it just is so fluid and and inconsistent in the way that it changes. With that being said, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to turn the time over to Jolene to walk us through the elements of your packet that she prepared, so that if there is any questions about any of the items that you read through, we can hopefully entertain those. We may need to do some homework and get back to you, but nonetheless, the main purpose is to make sure that we're on the same page with you as it relates to your priorities.
Yes, sir. And just before we bring Jolene on, it brought up a really good point. When Carter sends out emails to the entire council, if you do have the questions that he speaks of, please only reply to Carter. Do not hit reply all. I have learned, especially over the last week, that sending out a mass email to everyone is a violation of the Public Meetings Act. Carter can send emails to all of us without any issue whatsoever. But if you have questions, please just hit reply to Carter, not reply to all, because then you are now in violation of that Public Meeting Act. So
I just want to add, if you actually send us all an email through BCC, we can never hit reply all. We can only hit reply to you.
Jolene, the floor is yours.
Mayor, councilors, we're going to just do a quick recap if I can figure out how to do this for WAM. This year, as you all may know, is going to be a very interesting legislative year for us. We have 30 freshmen legislators, and 5 are from Natrona County. So we're calling it the Orient, Monitor, and Watch year. That's kind of how we see it unwinding or coming down for WAM. Here was our process for a recap. You'll recall in the spring, we submitted these issues to WAM. Then we had quite a robust membership that went down to the convention in Laramie and sat through and developed these 18, more or less, WAM resolutions. You'll see that every single one of ours was chosen by WAM, thank you counselors, was chosen by WAM to be an issue or a priority. From there, we work through the interim process with the interim committees to try and get bills. You will see that we were not terribly successful in doing that this year. We were successful, when I say we, this is WAM, because we're members of WAM, mostly on the liquor license area. The one that we brought forward was the fair market value. If you recall, we had a proprietor here in town that came to us and said, when we're doing bar and grill licenses, that's what they are, bar and grill, right? We sell them. When the entity sells, this person is saying instead of being able to sell them at higher, so we sell them at $1,500. Now it's yours to own, I guess. And if you sell your business, you now sell that retail liquor license at up to $100,000 or more, and they become unaffordable, or way more. They become unaffordable. This proprietor said, wait a minute, let's make it fair. Let's make it where everybody can get into the game. And let's try and get some legislation by which the bar and grill license always comes back to the city and is always resold for the $1,500. So the city's always getting the fee, and it's not the private business owner that gets lucky and gets that and now has it at a highly inflated cost. It did not happen that way. The bill that is here only allows us to set licenses between $300 and $1,500. It doesn't address it at all, so we'll be looking at revisiting that. So WAM has, in my memo, I said 7 priorities. Today you got an email from me, talk about fluid. We learned that there are 9 priorities. There are 3 liquor license bills that were in your packet. There's an abandoned buildings bill that's in draft form. It has not come forward yet. We don't know if it's going to be filed. WAM's working with, I believe it's Representative Sherwood from Cheyenne on this, and they think it's going to come forward. We don't know if it is or not, but you saw that. Direct distribution, I want to go back to abandoned buildings for a second. I would not suggest that you approve the abandoned buildings as it is tonight, to say go forward with it. We think that it needs help. I talked to Liz Wallace and the attorney's office today about it. We're not sure that it's right for Casper, so you can tell us to do more work on it, but we want to bring it forward with a little more information for you to consider. Direct distribution. The governor has included a $15 million increase in direct distributions to cities and towns. Right now, Joint Appropriations Committee is suggesting that amount be cut in half. We want to keep our eye on direct distribution, not only the amount that we usually get, but on this would be a nice bonus for the city of Casper, and we'll be watching this very closely.
Jolene?
Yes, sir.
Can you please remind this council how much in direct distribution we get?
The city of Casper receives almost $4 million every year in direct distribution from the state of Wyoming. That's a significant part of our funding, and without direct distribution, we would have a very difficult time balancing our budget. That will put us in a not a good situation. WildLink funding came forward today. That was the email that I sent you. When WHAM sent out their list today, I got on and I saw that was one of their priorities. WildLink funding is the interoperable radio system, and what they're proposing, two things. They're proposing to put 8.6 million, is that right, Chief? Can you remember? Is it 8? It's either 8 or 8.6 million appropriation to fund the operation every year into WildLink. In addition to that, they're looking for a WildLink trust fund that they will put $100 million into, and the funding goes for the interoperable radio system. It will also pay for equipment for state and local government, etc. So this is a very good deal for public safety for cities and towns. And that's new today, that was not in your packet. The other thing is, on our agenda, is to monitor and be prepared for advocacy. This is going to move very fast. We have new people. We don't know what to expect. We don't know what to expect as far as our relationships with our new legislators. We've historically had a very good relationship with all of our Natrona County delegation, and we have been able to talk to them. We have 5 new people that we don't really know and can call up easily or text or email on some of the issues that we're concerned about. The planned interim topic, WHAM is suggesting that we don't even try and get Amendment A program in place. That the lift on it would be far too heavy, and we would end up perhaps not getting the ideal money management that we want to get the interest and the dividends and the investment income that we want from Amendment A passage. So we're planning to take it to corporations probably as an interim topic. The only way that WHAM sees it going into a program is if we go with a WyoStar program. Jill and Carter are not in favor of a WyoStar program. We are in favor of choosing our own money manager, letting council choose our own money manager. Those are the 9 WHAM priorities. So here are some other ones that WHAM is watching. To give you a background, there is a bill out there that city officials do not have to take their salary. You can waive the salary. This is based on Diamondville. They received a state audit, and the mayor had not taken a salary for years, and Diamondville was forced to back pay from the audit, the mayor, even though the mayor didn't want that. So there's a bill out there for that. The concern about that is that elected officials will be shamed into not taking their salary, and WHAM is being really careful that they don't want that to happen. HB 0048, Zulima, Hogadon, maybe. If this passes, there would be, this next one, okay. This one would be $40 million that's put into a recreation grant, transportation recreation grant. 90% of it would go to YDOT for safe routes to school, 10% would go into the tourism or parks budget to be spent on grants for planning or construction of natural trails only for hiking, horseback riding, or mountain biking. The homestead exemption, that's on property tax. There's a bill there that says the first 100,000 of the homes, a home's fair market value, will be exempt. They expect if this bill goes through or in the bill, that local government would be reimbursed for the losses. HB 0071 is a sales tax holiday for back to school. So I guess everything that's, I don't understand it completely, but my understanding is yes.
Jolene, House Bill 54, who's reimbursing the local government? Is that coming from the state or?
Yes.
It is?
That's in the bill. Now, whether this passes or not, mayor, councilors, whether that passes or not, we'll watch and see what happens. HB 0072, here's another interesting one. Lower the state sales tax to 2.5%. Remove all exemptions, tax all services, but counties would have the opportunity to take it to the voters to exempt what they would want, county by county, on what they would want to exempt from sales tax. HB 0074, this is Hogadon Hello. This would be a Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund, similar to the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Trust Fund and the Cultural Trust Fund and the WildStar Trust Fund. Wyoming's been doing a lot of those where they put a corpus in and there's money that is spent in grants, and these would be on outdoor recreation type items. So hopefully in some of the summer things that we want to do, for example, in Hogadon, might apply. That's all I have on kind of the overview for the legislative session.
Anything else any questions for Renee? Excuse me. Jolene. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Jolene, for all the information. No questions, but I did just want to remind our most junior council members, if you hadn't considered going to WHAM winter conference, it's in a couple weeks. I think they sent out an email, there's an orientation aspect of it or something like that. I think I went my first year, it was very helpful. And WHAM just in general is a really good opportunity to hear from other municipalities across the state. We deal with a lot of the same things, and so it's interesting to hear how they're kind of addressing it. I guess I do have one question for you, Jolene. This council, at what point do we determine, I imagine it's after session, but when do we establish what we would like WHAM to prioritize the next session? When do we have that conversation? I don't remember.
We will have that March, April.
Okay, thank you. Right after session.
And we will also be looking, I'm sorry, Mayor,
Ma'am, you're
councilors.
fine, thank
We
you.
will be thinking, because we also, toward the end of this session, have interim topic time. And in order to get an interim topic on, we have to get a legislator to sponsor it. So last year, we were already looking at some of our issues that we wanted to do, and we got them as interim topics. Vulnerable persons and professions. Actually, all of ours, we asked for to be interim topics. So we started very quickly doing, talking to our legislators, not only here, but around the state who we knew might be friendly to it, because we cannot get an interim topic on unless a legislator sponsors it. Has to be sponsored. So we'll start looking at these, and I'll give you the date as soon as I find out for interim topics when they're due. And so if you know of stuff, I'm expecting that some of these we would want to take forward again. They were very good topics and we were all very supportive of them. But that's what I'm thinking you would want to do. I'm not telling you what to do.
Kyle.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Jolene. So it sounds as if during this session, we will have an opportunity as a council to have a conversation about what we would like to see explored in the interim before session ends and before our meeting in March or April. Okay. I have things that I would like this council to, propose, and so I will bide my time and wait for that.
Mayor, councilor, actually, the sooner the better that you start talking to us about topics.
Okay.
The better, because we can start fleshing them out and writing them up as resolutions that we bring forward to council for approval.
Is now a good opportunity.
Why not? You are more than welcome, sir. I was gonna bring one up myself.
Okay. Well, I have a little bit of something written, surprise, surprise, so.
I'm not surprised.
As Councilor Pollack mentioned earlier, the WAM priorities have to deal mostly with alcohol. I'm totally on board with that. If you haven't read the bills, look into them. Like Jolene said, one of them is establishing kind of the costs of what the bar and grill licenses are. Ideally, we would have had that provision where it reverts back to city, but it sounds like that's not part of it this time. And then also creating a tavern and entertainment license, and then expanding, I think, the capacity of bar and grill, the cap for bar and grill licenses, I think was the third one. Phasing out restaurant licenses and expanding bar and grill licenses. So I'm on board with all of those proposals. However, I do think it's a bit hypocritical with how supportive WAM is of those initiatives while cannabis is still illegal in the state. And so, segueing into that, if I could just take a few moments of your time. So cannabis criminalization was never based on any scientific reasoning or rationale. It seems to have coincided with a rise of racist sentiment against Mexican immigrants in the 20s and 30s. And so if you don't believe reefer madness and all the other propaganda used at the time to justify its criminalization, examples are it made black people rob, rape, and murder white women and whatnot. So if you don't believe in that logic that made it illegal in the first place, I ask, what reasons are there to keep it illegal now? And so if the intent of keeping a drug's usage illegal is based on the level of danger that it presents to our society, then I think alcohol should absolutely be criminalized to a greater extent than cannabis. There's not a single metric I can think of in which alcohol would score as less dangerous than cannabis. In Natrona County, alcohol is involved in 80% of traffic crashes, 25% of domestic violence incidents, and 38.5% of all overall crime. DUIs and public intoxication account for over half of all custodial arrests in our state. In Teton County, 84% of all crime is alcohol involved. Other drugs, 7.3%. And you can find that the WASCOP, Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chief of Police, they released an annual report where it breaks this down for every county. I would encourage you to go look at those stats. They're very interesting. If an individual consumes too much alcohol, they die. If an individual is dependent on alcohol and suddenly stops, they die. When I worked at Central Wyoming Counseling Center, they have a 90-day rehabilitation program. We surveyed every resident that came through our program. 9 out of 10 times, their preferred drug of choice was alcohol. However, despite all these societal ills that we tried with prohibiting alcohol, it failed miserably. It instead drove that underground, and I think we're all familiar with kind of the state of prohibition in the 20s and what that reality looked like. And I would argue that's the same exact thing that's happening with the war on drugs today. The U.S. has 5% of the world's citizens, but has 25% of the world's prisoners, nearly as much as Russia and China combined. These communist hellscapes imprison far less people than America. The land of the free is in our national anthem. I think that's extremely ironic, considering the fact that in our state, 50% of the people in Wyoming prisons are there for revocation of their probation or parole for using a prohibited substance. Since 1980, our population in the state has risen 20%, but our prison population has risen 400%. Sentences are longer, and they're being handed out to more people. This approach is not yielding the results we would like, and so I ask, why do we keep doubling down at the expense of the individual liberties and personal freedoms that our residents are always romanticizing? I would encourage that we take that $35,000 to $50,000 that we currently spend per prisoner per year and instead save that by decriminalizing personal use possession of illicit substances. My opinion is of all sorts, not just cannabis, and funding treatment and recovery programs instead. I've quoted Benjamin Franklin on council before. His quote, "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." I believe that strongly. Not only is treating substance abuse as a public health issue the most evidence-based and fiscally conservative approach, I also believe it is the most constitutional. Article 1, Section 1 of the Wyoming State Constitution guarantees us all the inalienable and indefeasible right to alter, reform, or abolish the government in any such manner as we think proper. Article 1, Section 7 guarantees that no arbitrary power over the lives, liberty, and property of free men exists in a republic, not even in the largest majority. I would argue that our current drug laws are indeed arbitrary based on all of the reasons I just listed. Article 1, Section 14 prevents the use of cruel and unusual punishment, which I believe incarceration is in regards to personal use and possession of drugs. If you are under the influence of drugs, driving, putting other people's lives at risk, if you are keeping that near a child, and they would have access to that. All criminal behavior, all should be treated as such. Personal use and possession of drugs is an individual matter, and so I do believe incarcerating people for what they do with their own bodies. I believe that's cruel and unusual. Article 1, Section 15 guarantees that the penal code shall be framed on the humane principles of reformation and prevention, and I don't believe it is currently. And so we are currently advocating, rightly I believe, to make more money off of retail liquor license, creating tavern and entertainment licenses, and adding bar and grill licenses. And I believe, in conclusion, it would be very hypocritical of WHAM, but also this body, if we were to support the expansion of individual rights to consume, sell, and profit of alcohol, while we continue to ignore the potential that cannabis legalization can offer, especially, I don't know if you've seen, but one of our counterparts in Cheyenne, their new chair of the council, I believe is the title for
I think so.
their president,
Something like that, yeah.
something like that. The leader of their council, Robert, did I get that? Richard Johnson. So he made the news a couple weeks ago because he's making that a priority. Decriminalization is the stance he's taking, but I see an opportunity for us to join in that effort. I'm disappointed that the legislature continues to not debate and take seriously this opportunity or this potential, and so I'm going to advocate that this board join Richard in Cheyenne and try to push the Wyoming legislature to, University of Wyoming studies show that the majority of our residents are in support, and I don't believe that's being reflected in the legislature, and so I'd like to see what we as a municipality can do to force our hand in that direction. That's all I have, I think. Appreciate you coming to my TED Talk.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind, I'm going to rebut you just a little bit.
Go ahead.
I don't know that the entire state is behind it because it's been put to the voters before and failed.
What is that?
Wasn't it?
It's never been on the ballot.
I don't know if it's ever been voted on.
There's never been
Oh, it failed at the legislative level to get put on. That's what it was. You're right. Secondly, I don't know, and the city manager would have better insight than me. I don't know that now is the time to debate this or to go after it, because I think it would have to be, this would be something we'd have to talk about in April after this session is over, because it's not something that's going to be addressed at this session, if I am correct.
Mr. Mayor, I think you bring up a good point. We've got a couple directions we can go with the context that we're kind of considering right now. First of all, we're concerned that we have the right bead on priorities that are currently in front of both WHAM and the legislature. And certainly I would take, I would try to understand that one council person's direction is, if cannabis becomes a legislative topic this session, he would argue that we need to get behind it to make it a priority. We don't know if that's going to happen, is our problem. And so I'm not exactly sure what to do with respect to topics that aren't on the horizon right now versus what may be in the next legislative session. And so I'm a little, I'm not sure where to go with regard to future topics versus what we've got in front of us right now.
Follow up if I may.
Please.
Thanks, Bruce. So apologies if I misunderstood, but my understanding was that during the session, legislators will be developing their list of interim topics for the next session, and that is what we were discussing is, I'm totally on board with what's going on this current session. I don't have any evidence to believe that cannabis is going to come up in this session, and so I am advocating that we get it on the radar so that whoever legislators may sponsor this bill the next session, they're aware of it, and we lock them in or get it on the list of interim topics for the next session or the session after that if it's more appropriate, since next session will be a budget session.
Well, something I'd be interested in too is just as a, if I may, and this is reaching, of course, but as a straw poll, how many of this on this council would be interested in pursuing or advocating for what Mr. Gamroth is talking about? I guess I'd be curious to know. Can I get a thumbs up for those that would be interested in doing that?
To get it put on an interim topic.
Decriminalization for sure.
Said decriminalize marijuana. So 3 of you? Okay. Yeah, no, I just was kind of curious where we were at on that. So Kyle, it looks like you'd have some work to do even with our board, but that gives you an opportunity. The reason I did that was to give you the opportunity to gather information and present it, because I, for one, have always been very against it. But you know what? I was also against anti-discrimination. But once the facts were put up in front of me and I understood what it meant and how it is, I changed my tune very quickly, and I'm very proud of that. And so I'm not opposed to anything if you could present me qualified information that shows me that that's something we should be doing. So anyway, that'll give you some homework to do, if you will. And I was also going to let you know, Jack Greer reached out to me. He owns 307 Horse Racing. He's a friend of mine. And he said that he was very disappointed in the gaming situation, and that if there was anything he could do to help, he would be happy to do that. My opinion is there are gaming establishments in the county and there are gaming establishments in the city. And I don't believe the county should have their fingers in the city's pot, so to speak, when it comes to that money. And so I was really behind that, just for the revenue aspect of what it would do for the city. But I don't know if you guys know this, but a lot of the money, the revenue that's made from gaming goes to the county. So,
Despite the fact the establishments are in the city.
Correct.
So I do have a question regarding the gaming systems. So are we going to discuss limiting these at all? Is this going to be part of, do you know what's on the bills or anything? Because, Casper, right now, we hold the record for the state. We have like 634 machines with 30 places that have them, so we have the most.
The largest city too.
Is there going to be an end? We could have thousands of them at this point.
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, it just so happens that just before the general election concluded, I had gotten a call from a stakeholder who suggested that there may be legislative solutions that could be pursued if indeed the city of Casper were concerned about that very thing. I'm not aware of any legislation that would come forward that would give us an opportunity to weigh in on that question, but I absolutely believe that from an interim topic standpoint, conversations about gaming, with a number of nuances, by the way, could certainly be addressed. And frankly, I think that's probably going to be what happens. And I bet we get a topic of your interest as well. So I want to assure you that as a part of the legislative process that we follow very closely, the opportunity to weigh in on what interim topics should be proposed and hopefully embraced by the Management Council as they sign these things out, we'll get the opportunity to weigh in and submit a list and work through WHAM to get a number of those things considered.
Amber?
Can I get an update on the pharmacy benefits managers bill? Did it go to interim topic, or did it never?
It went to interim topic, and there is not a bill that is coming forward at all. There's not been anything filed, and as we know right now, nothing is coming forward.
And did you follow the conversation? What was the attitude of the committee?
As I understand it from WHAM, and I will get you more information, Counselor, that it was actually the pharmacist group that withdrew the bill.
Okay.
Of what was going on with that.
Right.
So we don't know if there will be anything that comes in, but right now there's nothing that we see on the horizon.
Thank you.
Mr. City Manager.
To chime in with regard to that, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Counselor. WHAM does have it on its monitor level, because it's very, very possible that an individual legislator could bring something forward and gain some traction. So we're keeping an eye out for that and hopefully get the opportunity to participate in that discussion.
Mr. Cathy?
I am trying to remember the committee, but there was a committee that met here. Well, I brought you the notes and everything from it. Do you remember that which committee that was? But the reason I bring that up is in addressing your comment about limiting the number of gaming establishments. That was brought up by myself and also Paul Bertolio as a county commissioner. about trying to figure out
Right, we
to
went
limit.
to the,
You were there too, yeah, absolutely. So okay, yeah. So it has been brought up to the legislative committees about that, so
I just wasn't sure if it was getting brought forward.
I
So I'm
have not
curious about
followed
that,
past
right?
that. Yeah.
Counselor Jensen?
It doesn't have to do with this one, but
have to.
liquor license,
It doesn't have to.
well, okay, good, are we done with that part? If you can put that back up, I can't remember, but it was I don't know what House Bill number it was, the liquor license and things, and maybe this is WHAM, maybe it's not, I don't know. But for like hoteliers and stuff, like there's some wordage in a current way as far as malt liquor sales that hotels can have, and there's some wording in there that is a little bit it's like 100, what is it, not square feet, it has to accommodate 100 people, I think, a capacity level in order for them to be able to sell liquor to their hotel guests. So is there a way, I don't know who does that, is it WHAM or do you go to your legislative as far as getting the wording changed on a specific bill to make them able to sell that malt liquor in a hotel, in their gift shop, or, like most hotels do?
Mayor, Councilor Fleur, Fleur's our liquor license and
I just wonder what level that goes to.
I'm sorry, you were wanting to change the wording for what exactly? 'Cause you're
Resort
talking about resort
licenses.
licenses, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Resort license. So how, the requirement on there and the wording on there, and it says you have to have, I think it, like a room that needs to have 100 or hold 100 people, or there's some kind of wording in there that's a little different.
So you're suggesting remove the 100?
Right. Is there, because there's some like hotel chains, I'll just say, I mean, like the Hilton or the Hampton, their hotel standards are that they sell malt liquor to their, available for their guests at hotel standard. But they're blocked because they don't have a meeting room or a conference room per se that is held for that 100 people. It's more like 75 or, you know what I'm saying, like close, but it's part that's an offered, it's an amenity for guests.
Is that a city ordinance?
Is that,
Your Honor?
State?
It's state, it's a state rule, so, Your Honor, if I
Right.
Yes,
may,
please.
I believe what you're wanting to do is to try and suggest that
amend
change.
it, yeah.
So we could suggest that to WHAM and ask that they take that topic up, and then that would go on. So that could be
Okay,
something we could bring up.
perfect. How do you do that?
Thank you.
Do you just do that? Or do I have to?
Your Honor, if members of council supported that, then we would bring that forward as a topic for WHAM.
Is that something the council would be okay with?
Do you want thumbs up?
Yes. If the council would be okay with that, allowing the verbiage that we're gonna send to WHAM, that the room doesn't necessarily have to be big enough to hold 100 people in order to help some of our hotels out that don't have those bigger rooms. Is that okay with the council? Kyle?
Thanks.
He had a question, so we can't.
Not opposed to it, but as far as like us seeking information to learn, like I haven't looked at the state statute, so I would like that opportunity before I just say yes. And I imagine you guys would like the opportunity to go over all the nonsense I just spouted, and so I guess I'm still a little lost on exactly when we are petitioning to legislators, what should be interim topics, and how much opportunity we have before then to discuss it as a group.
Mayor, councilors, I kind of confused it by bringing the interim topic because Amendment A is on the list for interim topics. And I do believe, and I think Carter would agree with me, that it needs to be on our radar tonight. So we'll put that on the list. And we'll start getting our list of what we want to do for interim topics through the legislative update. Tonight, we're talking about where WHAM is right now. There are two bills, the abandoned buildings, that's a draft that we need to give you a legal and community development opinion on, because we're not sure that where it is right now that we say to you, go for it, that we're hoping to give you that. Craig and the group are looking at that, and there's one from Evansville that they have asked Representative Chadwick to sponsor on purchasing and public works bidding, that we're also getting a legal opinion on because they're asking us to support that. So in the next, I would say, week or two, at the pre-meeting or the next work session during the legislative discussion, those two we will be talking to more about from this list to say yay or nay, because next week by minute action, we want to bring forward that you've approved what we have put up here tonight as the WAM priorities that you approve us to advocate for and keep and go for as a city.
That's a good plan.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just to add on, please don't think that we are trying to be dismissive of any ideas that you have and want to have discussion with your fellow colleagues here about ideas and topics that we need to pursue on your behalf. I just think we're a little ahead of the game right now. We are, the convening of the legislature took place within days ago. Today, thank you, within hours ago, right? So we are at the very, very beginning. We are not near topics for next session yet. I promise you, we will be sure to get all kinds of vetting opportunities to the topics of interest to you, okay? So, but we're just not there yet.
And actually, at that time, then you can bring up yours and yours as well, right? Mr. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I don't want to sound redundant to what Carter just said, but I think it's, we need the time to digest this session, go through all this, and then we'll have the opportunity to really kind of talk about that. Because a lot of the time too, the city will bring other issues and ideas to us, and then at that time we can present our ideas of what we think we should want to what we should have, and then we can have that opportunity to just dissect and do the research that we need for all those opportunities, and that'll help out, so.
Sir.
One more opportunity, Mr. Mayor and councilors, that you could consider would be the strategic planning session on the 31st, wherein if there is a major goal relating, for example, to cannabis and those kinds of purported benefits and so on, it could very possibly fit into a safety and wellness goal that you might want to consider as a part of what you want to do over the next couple of years. And so that'd be something else I'd ask you to consider if you think it, fits into a larger goal that you want your colleagues on the council to embrace.
Amber?
I was just gonna add that, yes, it's early in the game, it just came into session today, but the session's gonna be over in the blink of an eye, and when we have the opportunity to submit interim topics, we kind of need to have them ready. So if you think over the next couple of weeks, so that when the question is asked, we're not gonna have weeks to mull it over. You're gonna have to be pretty much
The session's what, 6 weeks long, so.
37,
We have a handful of
37 working
meetings.
days, yeah, so it'll go fast, so it's a good reminder to start thinking about it now, I think.
Okay, anything else on legislative review? No, Jolene, thank you very much.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
so is it okay to bring these forward on minute action for the next meeting?
Everybody okay with that? Can I get a thumbs up, please? Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Moving on to agenda review, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. For those of you who are new to this topic, part of the agenda, I generally work from this document, the grid, we call it the grid, to not only review what's on the agenda coming up, but also what we see on our near horizon, which is on the very back page, where we try to get future topics sort of queued up, if you will. And so that'll be sort of the last sort of page we go to, the last topic we go to. For the 17th, a couple things I want to bring to your attention. As you can see, the public hearing and motion for the Budget Amendment 2 adoption is an example of where you can sort of follow items throughout their progression as you hear about them and so forth. Another one would be the SRO agreement that we've discussed with your previous colleagues coming forward on the 17th. Again, another example that you can sort of follow items as they progress to final determination. One of the items that is kind of interesting, I'm not sure we've had the opportunity to talk about, is back on the first page under the 17th. Many of you have heard that the Horseheads are a defunct organization in our community.
Now we're getting the taters.
Now we're getting the Spuds, yes. that want to come in with that same league and entertain a lease agreement with the concessions effort to carry out where the Horseheads left off. And so that's where that comes in. That's what that's all about. A real simple agreement, one that you're familiar with, in that we did the exact same thing with the Horseheads. The interesting thing that I would bring to your attention, however, is the Independence League, the Spuds, are not the only baseball clubs that want to consider Casper as their next home. And so for the following year, we're going to have a really interesting discussion and dialogue about potentially who that should be, or who could do that in concert with each other in terms of operating out of Lansing Field as their home field. So just a little teaser, if you will.
Before you jump off that one, may
Sure.
I?
Please, yeah.
Lisa, it just reminded me of the question you asked earlier about, to Zulema, when you asked her about the hockey club that wanted to rent, what would the opportunity be, to replace them if they left? Well, I think this is a prime example of, once you have the facilities and once you have, a place for a program like that, they'll be knocking down your, like next year, we're gonna have to pick who's gonna do it. Because I think once that's available, I think it's an easy fit, don't you?
Do they
I know.
have to be at Mike Lansing Field? Can you have one at the North Casper and one at Mike Lansing?
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, I love that question. And I think
Let's do two.
I would invite you to think broadly like that. That's exactly right.
Yes.
See, that's what we bring, we're getting these juices flowing.
Yeah, and then they're gonna say, well, we want stands like they have, and now we're gonna be another million. That's coming, but that's a great idea, actually. Sorry, please, Mr. City Manager.
No problem. It's gonna be a good dialogue, that's for sure. The only thing I would probably bring up on the 17th is we probably will need a land topic for the executive session next week.
We have litigation and personnel already.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Why not?
Well, I'm looking at it, shouldn't be a very long meeting, so.
Yeah, no.
Jinxed us already.
Absolutely.
You've already jinxed us.
No, I'm not Ray. Look we're gonna be out of here by probably 7:15. I'm smoking you. Anything else, sir?
The work session, a number of topics that have also sort of been a continuing theme. The CY and Poplar intersection, we will have guests from the state to visit with us that evening.
Yes, sir.
We're going to continue Zulima's theme, if you will, on the 24th as it relates to subsidies pertaining to sports and recreation. So that'll be a vigorous discussion pertaining to your suggestion earlier about selling the rec center, right? Holy moly.
That was when I first started.
You brought it up tonight, though.
Oh, yeah.
I heard you say it.
Yes, sir, I did.
Not to say that that's an idea, I'm just saying.
I brought it up for a different reason in the beginning, though. It was because I never felt like municipalities should compete with private business like the YMCA and private gyms and everything else. I have issues with that. But
absolutely.
With that said,
big ideas.
Right?
We inviting our big ideas to this table.
Nothing's off the table here. Nothing.
Good.
I'm sorry, Opie, I can't.
Thanks.
Just blame me for that.
We already know, Selena. Look at my graph. I just
We're getting punchy here. I apologize.
Now it's happened.
Awesome.
Big ideas. We love big ideas. We really do.
Yes, sir.
The Athletics Fund and 1 Cent 17 Fund is actually a topic that Ms. Johnson would like to cover with you as it relates to tightening up our fund structure so that indeed we have some efficiencies that we can gain there, as well as some opportunities that we haven't had in the past, particularly as it relates to the Athletics Fund. Another topic that Zulema has also gotten behind as well. I'm excited to have those conversations for that particular work session. You can see for the final work session, the first work session in February, which happens to be the 14th. We are going to hear, at least ostensibly, tentatively, from the health department, and we're going to talk about the subsidy at the golf course. I would suggest that 2 topics for the 14th is probably a little misleading. I'm sure we're gonna have more by the time we actually get to the middle of February. To conclude my comments, however, I would direct your attention to the very back page entitled Future Agenda Items. Again, this is the page where we try to queue up topics of interest to you, topics that we need direction on as well from staff. And this is the place where if you don't see topics that you thought should be included in this page that for some reason aren't yet, please let us know. We don't want to allow anything to drop through the cracks when in fact council has some direction they want to give on an element of interest to all of you. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I would conclude my agenda review.
Thanks, sir. Before we start with council around the table, I would very much, we have some very important people that do a tremendous amount for the council, and you may or may not know them. So for our 3 new councilors, I would like the folks in the room who are an integral part of what we do to introduce themselves so that you know who they are. Some of them have spoke tonight, some haven't. But Jolene, if you don't mind starting, just state your name and what you do for the city, mainly for Jenna, Michael, and Brandy.
Jolene Martinez, I'm an assistant to the city manager out of the city manager's office.
Mayor, councilors, Courtney Williams, I'm in the clerk's office and I do records management.
Fleur Trauma, I'm state clerk and assistant to the city manager.
And Fleur does a lot, so you'll be getting emails from her all the time. Chief, if you don't mind, I don't know that everybody knows you.
The police department.
He is our chief of police, so if you didn't know.
Jackie Brown, interim city attorney till January 23rd. Then our current county attorney will be here. And then I go back to being a deputy city attorney, mostly handling litigation and prosecution.
I'm Jill Johnson, and actually we got to meet earlier today. I'm the financial services director.
Jake Black, Fire Chief. Nice to see you all again.
Lake Lopez, Parks Rec and Public Facilities, and you guys will see me often.
Often. Thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I think it's nice for everybody to know who's in the room with them, and they're in the room with us almost all the time. So.
Missing a few too.
And we are missing a few, and when they come, I will put them on the spot as well. So, with that said, we will start with council around the table. Councilor Pollack.
Thank you. I had my first Amico Reuse Agreement Joint Powers Board meeting today. And really there was just one topic of conversation. I'm still going over all of the back information, but today the topic was, from what I could gather, was something that group has been talking about for quite a long time, which is sort of the future of Three Crowns Clubhouse and the potentials that exist there, ways that they see that facility working to lower their subsidy on that facility and potentially grow into a facility that has more sustainability through the next many decades. So we got a presentation from the management company there to go over a variety of I think elements that they're looking at, some that would include capital investment from that group, some that are just more sort of operational changes that they see that are needed, and some that are more based on the amenities and the services that they're offering and that mix that they offer their visitors. So really kind of a similar process to what we've been going through at the city with our facilities and how to make the most of them, make sure they're meeting the needs of the users and that sort of thing. So that was 100% of the meeting today. So pretty easy to get my teeth onto just one topic today, thankfully.
So the subsidy she did speak of, just so you know, doesn't come from the city.
Yeah.
It comes from the Amico Joint Powers
Yeah,
Board.
same as the capital, like we're not talking about
Right.
city cash. It's from they have their own bucket. Yeah.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Well, thank you very much. Randy?
I just got my committees, so I don't have anything yet.
But you can bring anything relevant or any concerns you have, or
We just did our orientation and tours over the last 2 days, so I've got nothing just yet.
how did you like that though, by the way?
You know, I was really bummed we didn't get to do the walkthrough for the solid waste facility.
That was my favorite part.
Me too, I really
I
like
Especially when the
love
guy
the solid
takes,
waste facility.
especially when the guy takes his glass and takes a drink and goes, see, it's good, and you're like,
We didn't get that. It was raining. We had to do a drive-by.
Oh, man.
It was a shame.
Awesome.
Found myself a meme to take to work. We're good.
well, I'm glad you were able to partake. Mr. Kathy?
I will let you take care of the CNFR that we went to last night. Something that I would like to bring up to put on the future agenda is snow plowing. We need to relook at windrowing and picking up all of the snow everywhere.
Mr. City Manager?
We are very pleased to be able to have that conversation if council so desires.
Would everybody be okay with that being on a future agenda?
Certainly.
Yeah, okay, so if we could tee that one up, sir?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Kathy, anything else? Okay, thank you.
That's
Mr. Bond?
As Brandon said, we just had our orientation, finished our 2-day orientation today, and I just want to say thanks to Fleur and Carter especially. You guys kept us moving, and it was pretty fast. I'm a retired guy. I'm not used to you doing that much. But anyway, it was very good, and I feel like I have a much better understanding of, just with your help and so forth, just understanding the structure of the city, how it operates, who's in charge, who's responsible for what. And thank you so much for that.
Awesome. Anything else?
So I'm looking forward to the legislative discussion. That'll be interesting.
Thank you. Lisa?
So I am the council liaison for Visit Casper, and they have a class for the CTA class, so I signed up for that class and took it this morning. It's a 4-hour class. And I strongly encourage everybody, if you haven't attended or even had the opportunity, it's worth it. It's I'm now a certified tourism ambassador, but they give you a book. I've lived here my entire life, and there was information in that book that I didn't even know. And so it was actually quite interesting for the 4-hour class. And so and then in the class, there were some people with the library and just discussing with them. So they had said that a lot of their patrons come in and they complained that there is not a bus to the school district central services. And so I said that I would mention that, and they said that it is constant, almost weekly, that they get asked for if there's a bus that goes up there. And so apparently we don't have a bus that goes up there.
Is that the one up on the hill, up on?
Yeah,
up
the main school district. So I said I would present that to you as it's one of their common complaints, plus going up to the trail center. So, but the school district is the one they said that they get that asked a lot for. I don't even know. I just said I would bring it to you. And then the one thing that I want to bring up is a safety issue, and also just kind of a weird thing. On the side of our parking lot, we have a Purple Heart clear over here in the middle of nowhere. And if that's really for a Purple Heart recipient, why isn't it closer to a door? Like that it's an accessible door for somebody of honor. And so I'm suggesting we move that closer to the door and then giving us 9 parking spots for city council. It's just when we have meetings, especially during the work session, we're fighting for parking spaces out in the middle of the parking lot, and then we're leaving at night and it's snowing in a blizzard, and like we're having to traps through the parking lot and stuff. So I would like to see if we could just get designated parking spots just for council members.
I would certainly like to see us have 9 spots, because a lot of us, it's dark when we leave, especially the women. That bothers me. I always try to wait and walk out with them so I can keep an eye on them till they get to their car. But if they're going here and there, it's a little more difficult. So it would be nice if that was possible, because I think we have some spots over there for something
Now
else.
they're just all empty now. It used to be for the state.
Well, if we could just reserve those, that'd
No
be
problem.
great. Steve?
No problem. I was gonna say, we used to have 9.
That's what
until
Ray
we
said.
started building the state building, and then they had to park there because of using, and it was a trade-off, and we came down to 3. And so I love the idea of moving the Purple Heart back
By the
over.
front door.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, yeah, we could move it
Or even
next to
over here by the
handicap.
west doors.
Right.
Yeah, move it next to the handicapped or wherever, yeah.
That's a great
I
idea.
think that would be a good idea.
Does that get utilized at all, I wonder? Or very often?
Not this evening, I almost parked in it, and I'm like, holy cow, I can't park.
Has anybody ever seen it used, ever?
Yes.
No?
I'm not.
You have?
But
Well,
not by
it's a
me.
fantastic idea, by the way. I think the mayor should get a special spot.
I'm assuming that they're an older person or maybe of disability and they're clear out in the middle of nowhere and that's
Just said it out loud. Okay, and Lisa, anything else?
That's it.
I would like to respond to, one, do you want to reach out to Liz, or do you want me to do that? Or concerning the bus route up to the center and possibly to the trail center? It might be worth talking to her
I'd be
about.
happy to visit.
Will you do it?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Ms. Jensen?
Hi, all right, so since it's 7:20 and you're trying to trump Ray.
No, please.
Don't worry, I'll take care of it. He'll throw the whole average off.
So.
I know, I'm like,
The wild card's sitting next to you, so don't worry.
That's right. No, thank you for that. And it has been a topic of conversation as far as that, so I think Liz is aware of it. Because it's been with the MPO as far as getting transit up to the trail center from downtown is a gateway, is part of that whole project. Being that we are a visitor center also with Visit Casper, that it would be beneficial for us to do that. And the hotels that are right there, so when visitors come, they can go and participate beverage-wise in the community. Also, though, I did, to echo Mr. Bond here, I wanted to say thank you to everybody that took the time to put the orientation together for us. All the managers and all the facilities that we went to, it was a terrific experience, and it was, I know they took time out of their day, and sometimes it was towards the end of their day yesterday, and they were like, yeah, but it was really great and fun to see friends and meet new people in their work environment and how proud they are to work for the city. And so it was just really nice. And you could tell that they have pride in their jobs because every facility was amazingly clean. So it was a great experience.
Awesome,
I enjoyed it.
awesome. Anything else?
No, that was it.
Okay, well, thank you. Mr. Gamroth? Dun, dun, dun. Just teeing you up, friend.
I would concur with Lisa about the parking spots. I had to take a couple laps to find a place to park, and I ended up like over here on the north side. That being said, I would totally advocate that those parking spots can be used by anyone else other than at Tuesday nights. You know, I don't want them reserved the whole week just for us to show up on Tuesday nights, so.
Maybe we could put on the sign for Tuesday nights from 4 o'clock to whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That'd be
because
fair.
I think it's a little much to reserve them all week long for us
I
to
agree.
use
I agree.
Tuesday night. But when some of us are rushing from work to try to get here on time, it does help to have an easy spot to get to. I don't know if I made it super clear in our last meeting, but I was sort of wishy-washy because we don't have a city attorney. We just have Jackie acting as interim, but I would like to discuss home rule. Specifically in regards to Mills and Bar None. That is the mechanism that they have argued warrants them not publishing their public notices in the Casper Star Tribune. I think I brought it up during one of the last meetings that they stopped publishing in the Tribune. There was a lawsuit filed, the judge dismissed the lawsuit, and I don't know what the current status is, but I would love for our incoming city attorney to give us his input on that and just home rule in general, how he thinks it applied. It's also the mechanism that Richard Johnson down in Cheyenne is using to start the conversation about decriminalizing marijuana. And so I would like our incoming city attorney to discuss in a work session what home rule is, I guess, and whether he believes those are legitimate uses of that mechanism. And so, I don't know if I made that super clear, I don't know if it made it on work session or anything at the last meeting, but I would like to have a work session about home rule, specifically in regards to public notices in the Tribune, as well as decriminalization of cannabis down in Cheyenne.
If I may, sir, I will come right back to you. Is that something we could put on for maybe late February to give Eric a chance to get his feet under him and get that on a work session, and then we can have Kyle tee that up with him?
You betcha.
Okay, great. Sorry, please continue.
Nope, you're good.
As long as council's on board?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that?
I would also like to get on our work session agenda, an overview of our camping ordinances. You all probably saw in Carter's weekly update that he sends to us that there was a recent cleanup, pulled 400 pounds of trash and about 50 pounds of human waste off the side of our trail system. And so I'm part of a task force that's discussing the homelessness issue, and part of that discussion is, camping ordinances and what impact they have on the issue. And so I would like just an overview of what our current camping ordinances are and whether there's potential to review and amend them. So would like that on a future work session if possible.
Can we possibly send him the ordinance first and have you get a look at it? Maybe the city's attorney's office can get
I can do
it.
that tomorrow.
Would you please, Jackie?
Yeah.
And she gets that to you, and then after you've looked at it, if you still would like a work session, then hit me up and we'll see if we can find a spot for it.
Could she go ahead and send that to everybody?
Sure, yeah, we don't mind.
And it's my understanding that if one council member asks for something, generally it's the policy to reply to the whole council.
Correct.
So that you all know what we're saying. What we say to one, we say to all.
Okay, and you'll have to forgive me for interrupting you, but if I don't go along with each one as you go, I'll forget one, and then you're gonna be like, I wasn't heard. So it's easier for me to just to address them as you go, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, great, thank
The
you.
last two are easy peasy. So Karen and Jim Canelo, I think is how you pronounce their last name. They're
Canelos.
Canelos?
At the
Everyone
office,
else knows but me, apparently.
at the office, yeah.
So they're retiring after 25 years. They're
Wow.
selling the office. So they're kind of an institution in this community, and so just much respect to them. I always hear good things about them as people and as business owners, and so thank you to Karen and Jim for all their service over the years with the office, but also Karen and Jim's restaurant. If there's any interested buyers, they have a great location. They did wonders with that building, so please reach out to them. And then also, Officer Randy Garrett will be retiring after 6 years with our police department, as well as Lieutenant Ben Matilla after 15 years. So thank you both to those gentlemen for their service, and good luck and best wishes to them both. I'm sorry?
Randy's a girl.
Randy's a girl. I apologize. Thank you to Randy. So thank you to both of them for your service, and congratulations and best luck, whatever you do.
And while he's on that, I believe you all got an email stating that, and there is a date set, I believe it's the 26th, where there'll be a farewell, and the more council that goes, the better. It's always nice to send our folks off and let them know they were appreciated. So if you can find it in your time, in your calendar to be there for that, that would be wonderful. I will be there as well, so.
That is a WHAM date.
And the start of the governor's tourism and hospitality convention.
I'm not going to the WHAM or hanging out with the governor, except for this Friday night I am.
Steve?
That's all.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you very much. Mr. Vice Mayor.
I don't have anything. All my liaison meetings and board meetings are coming up this month, so I will report as we go.
Thank you, sir. Here you go. I just have a couple things. We had CNFR last night. Things are moving along very well. In fact, they are expecting to, well, they're within 50 season passes of surpassing their biggest ever year already. And we're not even to the end of the month yet. So they're anticipating this probably to be the biggest one they've ever done. And going to be great and exciting. I know they've got some new corporate sponsors. I know Cenex has signed on and Les Schwab Tire. And so we've got a lot of great things are going on up there. Jim Dewey came up from Arizona. Yeah, I know he'll be here again next month. And that's a great organization, and it's so fun being a part of that. It's just such a good thing. I know their softball game will be going off without a hitch, and I got with Zelima today and ironed out some stuff there, and I think that's about it from that meeting. There's two things I'd like to see if we could get on agenda with council's approval. One of them, I know we've received our first check from the opioid settlement. I know the county did as well. And I know back in discussions, we had talked about possibly joining the county in a group effort and moving towards a drug detox center. Thank you. And I spoke to the chairman of the commission, which is how I knew they'd got their settlement already. And so I think we need to arrange for a work session and invite the chairman of the county, if it's okay with you folks, and see if we can't pool our money together and get moving towards a detox center, which this city desperately needs. So would that be okay with you?
Yeah, I thought, were we not waiting on word back from our attorney's office? I remember asking about this several weeks ago.
Sir?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we actually do have it on your future agenda items. What we don't have is just exactly what you said. We aren't sure that we have a full understanding quite yet with regard to what we can recommend to you.
How the money can be spent.
Exactly. So we're still working on that, but when we do have that figured out, I think that is a good idea.
Okay.
And we'll get it docketed, if you will.
Very good, thank you, sir. And the last thing I would very much like to see put on, I would like to have a discussion with our solid waste division concerning fees. It was brought to my attention, and then I found out for myself that it's also true, is if you have a city water bill, you can take your pickup up and you can dump your trash in the landfill for well, I don't want to say for free because you paid for that service through your bill, but if you have a bill, you can dump a truck that has an 8-foot bed stacked to the gills. You can go up and dump it with one bill. If you go in there with a 14-foot trailer, which is not even 2 pickup beds, you have to have 3 bills. So it's skewed, it's wrong, and it needs to be brought back into line, into fairness. And when I mentioned it to Cindy, she's like, "Oh, you should have called me. I'd have made it right." It's like, no, this needs to be done across the board. It needs to be appropriate to what it is. So if one pickup bed is 8 foot, 16 feet, a trailer should be 2 bills, not 3, and so on and so forth. So a 14-foot would probably qualify for 2, but I think we need to get some more generalized rules that are more fair to our public that are supporting and paying for the entire thing anyway, other than the 1 cent subsidy. So would you folks be okay with talking about that? Okay, great. So if we could get that on a future agenda. And other than that, I hauled rear home last night within the speed limit so that I could get to the national championship game, which I don't know if any of you are college football fans, but I was digging that. So, because I'm an Alabama fan, so.
That was not a game.
Anytime the SEC, that just goes to show you it's SEC or nothing. So, anyway, football playoffs are this weekend. I know there's a soccer tournament in Gillette indoor this weekend, and I think we're getting some of the overflow. And that's all I have.
I think there's a basketball tournament in town this weekend.
Excellent. That's that time of year. So get out and support the kids and do your thing.
Yes.
With that said, we will see you next Tuesday evening, pre-meeting at 5:30 right here, and council meeting at 6. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Drive safe. Floor. Would you hand that to Floor for me? Thank you.
Good work.
I gotta talk to the chief. I gotta go bust some balls over here. I'm kidding, I need some advice.
10, and then we just leave early. I won't.
Well, the reason I was asking was in case somebody got to ask